This is Atomic Shinobi and today I am going to narrate second and final part of What If Kid Naruto has full knowledge and power of Minato and Kushina. If you enjoy this video, please like, share and subscribe to this channel. Not wasting no time, let's start the story.
Naruto was lost in thought, gazing up at the ceiling. The fan overhead clicked, but he paid no attention. He paid no attention to his faucet's drips. He disregarded the chilly early morning air. Naruto wasn't in the mood to train, even though it was a little after 5 in the morning, when he would typically be running around the village or performing one-fingered push-ups. He was too preoccupied to consider a potential solution for the shadow clone jutsu he instinctively knew. He had reached an impasse. He was unable to come up with any explanation for how he knew it. It was simply nonsensical. Naruto moaned as he sat up, wanting to continue lying down rather than because he was sore. Without even flinching from the cold, he set his feet on the icy floor and walked slowly to the shower. Before entering the hot shower, he undressed, taking off the strange dog-shaped sleeping cap and matching pajamas Hinata had given him. In the shower, Naruto tried to think of the best solution. As the hot water ran over his body, Naruto sighed happily and allowed his thoughts to wander. His first team practice and long overdue conversation with Kakashi would take place today. Kiba appeared to have boundary issues, despite their best efforts to slip away from him. Every time he and Kakashi slipped away to talk, he would try to follow them and shout loudly. He would shout, "There shouldn't be secrets in a pack." Despite Naruto's advice to keep his mouth shut, Kiba persisted. When Kakashi claimed to have tried to support Naruto as a child, Naruto wasn't sure how he felt about it. He enjoyed the fact that it had been just him and Hinata for years, with the Hokage and Iruka visiting occasionally. Even though he came across as gregarious, Naruto could be aloof toward anyone but those three. He would joke around with people, but he found it difficult to trust them. Though Hinata assumed that his stay with the Uchiha was the reason for this, she was unable to persuade Naruto to discuss what had transpired in the room. It was the only secret between them, and at best she would learn a small detail that he would unintentionally reveal. When Naruto and Kakashi finally spoke, Naruto was unsure of what to anticipate. He shook his head, causing water to fly everywhere, and he sighed again. He wouldn't expect anything because he didn't know what to anticipate. For him, life operated in this way. He was never let down if he had no expectations. He didn't think Hinata would feel the same way about him because of this. He was a clanless orphan and the village outcast, while she was the clan heiress of the most prestigious clan in Konoha. There was no fairy tale in life. Happily ever afters were uncommon, and even less so for shinobi. In an attempt to shake off the melancholy thoughts, Naruto shook his head once more. He returned his focus to the course of his day. He scheduled an hour and a half to train Konohamaru and Hanabi after team training concluded at 3. Normally, he would invite Hinata to accompany him, but she would most likely decline since Hanabi didn't want her to witness her training. He would either train further or spend time with Hinata-chan after that. That was what Naruto was anticipating. After turning off the water and shaking himself once more to get rid of any remaining water, Naruto patted himself dry with a towel. He stopped by the faintly foggy mirror as he was leaving the restroom. He wiped the fog from his eyes and looked at the seal that was visible on his stomach. Now, the seal was always visible, not only when he was channeling chakra. During their infrequent chats, Kurama had informed him that it was due to their friendship. Anyway, whatever they were, it made the seal always visible. The Yondaimi's final jutsu, the seal on his stomach, was a masterwork. The Hake seal method, which involved placing 2 elephant seals atop an 8-trigram seal, served as a filter for the demonic chakra in addition to keeping Kurama trapped inside of him. That portion of the seal made perfect sense to Naruto. All seals originate from the fundamentals, even though they are extremely, and he meant extremely, complex and challenging. Simply put, they were disparate formula and technique combinations that yielded disparate outcomes. With one exception, though. A written formula was straight down the middle, over his belly button, and over the seal's spirals. Although it appeared to belong there and was the same color as the rest of the seal, Naruto knew it was an afterthought. He was unaware of what the fuck it did. Nothing in the history of Fuinjutsu even remotely resembled this little formula, which Naruto had spent years trying to decipher. The formula was written in its own language of Fuinjutsu, and Naruto didn't have a key, so it was even worse that he couldn't find even the most basic information. There was nothing there for him. Nothing, nobody, non-being, non-entity, non-existence, nothingness, not, nullity, obliteration, oblivion, scratch, shutout, trifle, void, wind, zero, zilch, zip, zippo, zot, ought, bagatelle, blank, cipher, diddly, insignificancy, not, nihility, nix, but nothing. Naruto scowled at the characters he had written. They seemed to him to be the solution, or at least a component of it. It appeared to be the most likely culprit, though he was unsure of how he knew. Naruto exhaled deeply. Experience had taught him that a glare at the seal would not reveal its secret. Naruto hurriedly dried off before putting on his clothes. It was a little after 7:30 when he looked at the clock. Astonished, Naruto blinked. He had spent more than 2 hours in the shower. He moaned to himself that he had missed breakfast on the way to the training ground, then grabbed his gear and leapt out the window. Alongside Hinata at the family table, Hinata was eating her rice in an awkward manner. She was eating with her sister and father. Hinata felt a twinge of sorrow as her gaze strayed to the vacant spot next to her father. Since her mother passed away, her father had kept the position vacant and forbade anyone else from taking it. Hinata was missing her mom. Hinata missed everything about her mother, including the hugs, the warm smiles, and her patience while she was learning a new skill. There isn't a better one, in her opinion. But Hinata has long since moved on from her mother's grief. It was inevitable to die. Despite how depressing it was, everyone passes away at some point. It's just part of life cycle. Life, death, and birth. Since Hinata realized that it was just her mother's time, she stopped lamenting her mother's passing. Did she wish she'd spent more time with her? She did, of course. However, she was aware that her mother's time was over and that everyone had a finite amount of time left on this planet. In contrast, her father was still deeply saddened by the death of his wife, her mother. Hinata could not comprehend how he handled his lost love, but she could understand his loss. She couldn't justify him destroying her family because he couldn't handle it. Because he disliked weakness, she couldn't justify him undermining Hanabi's confidence the way he had done to her before. Hinata had become estranged from her father, even though he had praised her, more than when he had made fun of her. When the praise came at the expense of Hanabi's confidence, she realized how meaningless and hollow it was. Hinata now considered herself foolish for ever seeking her father's blessing. Hiyashi said in a monotone, "Hinata, I understand that you have your first team training today," setting down his now empty rice bowl, which was subsequently taken by a branch member. As Hinata saw one of her cousins treated like a servant, she nodded without frowning. Hiyashi said, "I know you'll show that you are worthy of being the Hyuga heiress, as if that were the greatest compliment a person could receive." Despite feeling insulted, Hinata managed to give a stiff nod. Her clan was not great in her eyes. They were conceited and stupid, and they enslaved their relatives. Hinata was aware of her clan's enormous potential, and she was determined to use it to her advantage as clan leader. Hanabi exclaimed, "I'm training with Naruto," in the hopes of gaining even a small portion of the same recognition as her sister. Hiyashi acknowledged with a nod, but his expression remained unchanged. Even though he didn't like Naruto, he was aware that the Jinchuriki were largely responsible for Hinata's development. "Good, maybe he can help you with the holes in your stances. And mind your manners. You are a main branch member. Act like one," Hiyashi said with an icy voice. The idea of a non-Hyuga assisting his daughter with her gentle fist bothered him, but he couldn't argue with the outcome. Hinata was a failure before Naruto transformed her into one of the most gifted Hyuga in many generations. Although he didn't particularly like her modifications to the gentle fist, he did prefer them to the original. Hinata resisted his attempts to force her to give up the training method and the entire style. She would just say that he would see when he retired and she became the head of the clan, regardless of how much he pressed. Hopefully, Hinata would tell Hanabi that he would get the same training as her. Hanabi's gaze grew brighter. Her father's tone was icy, but he had given her a small nod of approval, which piqued her interest. Hinata picked up her empty bowl and got to her feet. After saying, "I have to leave for training, father," she turned to face her sister. Hinata grinned and said, "Naruto-kun told me to meet him at the training ground 7. I know you'll do great, Hana-chan," hoping her words would have some effect on her sister. No, they didn't. "Of course I'll do great, I'll do better than you, sister." Hanabi spit out the final word with venom as she glared at her sister, believing Hinata was making fun of her. Hinata felt like crying because she couldn't even support her younger sister without her interpreting it as mockery, but she refrained from doing so. Before heading to the training grounds, she repressed her annoyance and went to the kitchen to put her bowl down. Alongside Kiba was having breakfast with his family, just like Hinata. But there was no awkward tension, unlike Hinata. Sibling arguments and dog barking took its place. Hana chuckled as she poured another bowl of cereal, saying, "Sounds to me like that Kakashi totally kicked your ass." A year ago, while on a mission, she had come across it and had been eating it every morning ever since. Kiba's face was marked with a tick. He denied, "He did not kick my ass," and Akumaru backed up his denial. "He just, Kiba trailed off, unable to come up with a reason for Kakashi's brutal treatment of him. Totally and utterly demolished you, Hana concluded, grinning ferociously as she watched her beloved younger brother struggle. She loved making fun of Kiba, even though she knew that on Kakashi's worst day, there was very little chance that Kiba would be able to harm Kakashi. Mostly because she liked to watch him get frustrated. It was very funny. No one could ever claim that life at the Inzunka clan house was dull or quiet. Hana teased, "It sounds like you got your butt handed to you and the only reason you passed is because of Naruto," in response to something Kiba had said, which caused Kiba to frown. Even though Kiba knew it was a lie, he screamed angrily, He just got lucky, that's all, I didn't need the Baka's help. Plus, I gave him my bell, so I'm the reason he passed." He was aware that the likelihood was that they would not have passed if it had just been him and Hinata, since he would have charged in and become incapacitated. Hinata would have been left to face a Junin alone as a result. Hinata probably wouldn't have survived in the long run, but Kiba knew she could manage herself. They weren't really necessary for Naruto there. According to Kiba, Naruto could have obtained the bells on his own, and Hinata's generosity and Naruto's acquisition of the bells were the only reasons Kiba was a genin. Sume said, "Speaking of your teammates, you never told us what you think of them," Kiba, in his first public statement. Kiba gave his head a thoughtful scratch. He blushed and trailed off, "Well, Hinata-chan." Hana and Tasumi both rolled their eyes at Kiba's line of reasoning. Hana told her mother, "Mom means deeper than you think. Hinata's hot, idiot," and her mother nodded in agreement. Kiba suppressed the urge to lash out. He had seen firsthand how easily his mother and sister could be irritated in the mornings. Basically, she's really nice and a bit shy, but she has a pretty big ambition. She wants to get rid of most of her clan's traditions. She's already broken one of them when she used Senbon to take out Kakashi's leg. That was pretty cool, and I'm guessing that she has a few more tricks up her sleeve, Kiba said. That information sent Hana and Sume's perception of Hinata into overdrive. Despite being frequently paired together for tracking teams, there was some animosity between the Hyugas and the Inuzukas. Because of the way the Hyugas treated their kin, the Inuzukas disliked them. The Hyugas' enslavement of their branch members deeply offended the Inuzukas, who held the pack ideal in high regard, a quality inherited from their partners. In turn, the Hyugas detested the Inuzukas, believing them to be Neanderthals who worshipped dogs. The fact that a Hyuga was finally realizing how corrupt their clan was and planning to take action made them very happy. She also really likes cinnamon buns, and she smells like flowers, sweets, and Naruto, he said, a little grudgingly. Even though it sounded so eerie, Inuzukas frequently smelled people. You could learn just as much, if not more, about someone than you could from speaking with them directly. Kiba flushed in rage as Hana and Sume exchanged glances. He recognized their shared look and yelled in frustration, "Get your minds out of the gutter, pervs. We're 13. They just spend a lot of time together, that's all." Hana laughed. In a sing-song voice, Hana remarked, "I dunno Kiba, you are technically adults now," taking pleasure in the jealous rage that briefly appeared on Kiba's face. The idea of Hinata and Naruto together was shattered by Kiba. "They're just friends," Kiba rasped. "What about the blonde? What's your take on him?" Sume asked after his family laughed at his expense. Particularly after the recent mental image, Kiba frowned at the thought of Naruto, but instead of becoming enraged, he sighed. With a resigned tone, he began, "Naruto's an alpha," knowing that it would be useless to conceal that fact. The admission caused Hana's eyes to widen. Although it may seem insignificant, in the Inuzuka clan, being an alpha was highly valued. A pack hierarchy served as the foundation for their clan. Tasumi is the alpha example. Alphas are born leaders, the strongest members of the pack. Hana and Kiba are an example of beta. To Kiba's chagrin, betas performed the manual labor and followed their leader. The omega comes last. They are solitary individuals who don't fit in with the pack and lack the strength to start their own pack. In terms of team decisions, Naruto was superior to Kiba if he was an alpha by birth. Since Hana knew Kiba longed to be an alpha and detested following orders and being obedient to anyone, she was taken aback by his admission. "Really? Continue," Kiba ordered Sume, who was now much more engaged in the discussion. Hana laughed at that, recalling how Naruto had used laxatives in Kiba's food to end their date. "He's a bit of a dick, but I guess that's because he doesn't have a pack of his own," Kiba thought out loud, unable to recall a time when Naruto had been with anyone other than Hinata. "Okay. I knew that Naruto was holding back in the academy. I remember when he broke Sasuke Tami's arm, but I had no idea how much. He probably didn't even need us there. I'm sure he would have gotten the bells on his own with enough time. He smells weird though." He smells like a fox, but he also smells like a bird. Like a hawk or something. Sume scowled in response. She could not think of a reason why Naruto would smell like a bird, but she did know why he smelled like a fox. He shouldn't have any reason to smell like a bird, unless he kept one as a pet. Oh crap, I'm gonna be late. Kiba yelled as he hurriedly finished his meal and ran to the door, interrupting her thoughts. Hana shouted to her younger brother, remember to talk to Kakashi about signing the dog summoning contract, and got the response, I'll remember, before the door slammed shut behind her. On the practice field, all three of the new teammates showed up at Training Ground 7 simultaneously, before Kiba and Naruto nodded rigidly at one another, unsure of how to properly greet one another. Hinata and Naruto exchanged warm greetings. Kiba due to the alpha vibe of Naruto. Naruto because, aside from fights and practical jokes, he didn't spend much time with people of his own gender. Together, they made their way to the 3 training posts and sat quietly while they awaited the arrival of their sensei. Usually, Naruto and Hinata would converse, but Hinata was not feeling well after breakfast. Naruto knew from experience that Hinata needed time to consider the situation. Sadly, such mornings were not uncommon in the Hyuga household. Despite his best efforts to divert his attention, Naruto's thoughts were on Kakashi, which is why he remained silent. Kiba didn't even notice his team's silence because he was playing with Akumaru. They didn't have to wait hours for their sensei to arrive, unlike in the past. Their masked sensei appeared in front of them after a whirl of leaves. Yo, said Kakashi. Usually, Kakashi would have stayed at the Kia Memorial for an hour or two to tell Obito and Rin about his day and his expectations for it, but he chose to do that early this morning. In this manner, he avoided having to wait to speak with Naruto about the long, overdue matter. Kiba blinked, startled. He asked, startled, you're on time today? Before squinting his eyes suspiciously. He hoped it would be the former. Is this going to be an everyday kind of thing, or are you going to go back to your lame excuses tomorrow? He asked. Kakashi had a slightly irritated expression on his bare eye. Kakashi replied, my excuses are not lame. And yes, I'll try to show up a bit earlier, although he was aware that doing so would cause him to lose sleep. Nevertheless, since he hadn't slept for 8 hours in years, it didn't really matter. After hearing that, Hinata's gloomy mood slightly improved, not significantly, but she did wear a tiny smile. Kakashi started, now, I got a very basic idea of your skill levels yesterday, however, they are not complete, before turning to face Hinata and Naruto. He asked, and both of you nodded. Both of you used water walking, so I'm sure it's safe to assume that you mastered tree walking as well? With the same question in his gaze, Kakashi turned to face Kiba. As he was already so far behind his teammates, Kiba acknowledged, no, I've started it but I haven't made it past the halfway mark yet, feeling a little insecure. Kakashi gave nod. He got another nod and said, Hinata, could you use your Byakugan to help Kiba with the exercise? While you two do that, Naruto and I will practice taijutsu elsewhere. That way we won't break your concentration. Kakashi told the truth. Kiba accepted Kakashi's deception, nodded, and moved toward the nearest tree. Hinata quickly followed him, but she questioned why Sensei, who was skilled at lying, would make such dreadful excuses. For a few minutes, they traveled in a heavy silence after Kakashi gestured for Naruto to follow him. When they came to a tiny clearing far into the forest, they halted their progress. So, I imagine you have a few questions. I promise to answer them to the best of my ability, Kakashi said, breaking the increasingly heavy silence. Silently, Naruto uttered, just a few. Even though Naruto appeared to be very composed, his eyes were constantly searching to make sure they were by themselves and that Kakashi hadn't taken him away to be killed. As he saw Naruto surveying his surroundings, Kakashi wanted to sigh wearily. Naruto didn't seem to trust him completely yet. He stifled a sigh and gestured for Naruto to pose his queries. Naruto deadpanned, as if the idea of someone other than Hinata showing him kindness were alien. Who the hell are you and why do you seem so familiar? He asked. When Kakashi realized that it most likely was, his heart clenched painfully. For a short while, Kakashi remained silent as he tried to come up with a tactful way to deliver the news. With solemnity, he stated, I was meant to be your older brother. It was for the weak to be delicate. A few times, Naruto blinked. Naruto's brain was shutting down to process the bomb Kakashi had just dropped, so all he could think to say was, oh? Kakashi gave nod. We aren't related by blood or marriage, but I would have been like your older brother, Kakashi continued after noticing Naruto's expressionless expression. It was unclear to him whether that was a good or bad sign. With a hint of rage in his voice, Naruto demanded, if you were meant to be my brother then why in the hell am I just now hearing from you? Even though he didn't really know Kakashi, by which he meant scarcely, He couldn't help but feel abandoned in light of the new information. Kakashi felt like thrown away trash, which was strange given that Naruto had only met him 3 days prior. Naruto detested that emotion. But to Naruto's astonishment, Kakashi stiffened and his lone visible eye darkened with rage. "I was told to avoid you," Kakashi uttered while gritting his teeth. "The councils denied my every attempt to adopt you. I jumped through every fucking hoop they had and they still told me I couldn't look after you. They refused to let me take care of you like family should. When they told me that, I rejoined Anbu and got myself assigned to your Anbu protection squad." Naruto appeared startled. "I should have told the councils to go fuck themselves. If I had adopted you like I wanted, then those Uchihas wouldn't have gotten their hands on you. Hell, if I had been your tail that day, then they wouldn't have touched you," Kakashi roared. Naruto was accustomed to masks and lies. Experience had taught him that the blatant anger in Kakashi's eyes was real. He was aware of how genuine the self-loathing rage in his posture was. Why did they order you to stay away?" demanded Naruto, who felt as though he had been denied the opportunity to live a different life. If Hinata was still in it, it might be a better one. A voice from the forest spoke before Kakashi could respond. "Because my youthful rival would have killed everyone who looked at you in the wrong way." "Guy?" inquired Naruto in astonishment. That voice, and there are only 2 people in the world that say youthful. A few years prior, Guy had met Naruto during one of Naruto's training sessions. They occasionally trained together after Guy spent hours crying when he saw Naruto's spirit of youth, which caused him to become dehydrated and leave the hospital. It wasn't that Guy didn't try, but that was the extent of their relationship. "Hello my youthful prodigy." Kakashi snarled. "Get out of here, Guy," already recognizing his friend's unexpected appearance. Guy struck his trademark pose and said, "No can do, Kakashi. What kind of rival would I be if I let you risk your neck like this?" Naruto answered Kakashi's question before he could. Naruto demanded, his tone now unmistakably angry, "What does he mean by you risking your neck? Why do you care so much? Why am I so important to you?" Kakashi turned to face Guy, giving him a look that said, "Are you going to try to stop me from answering that question?" Guy paused and sent a message with his eyes that you can tell him to a certain extent, but it's a secret punishment, so don't push it. Ignoring Guy's warning glances, Kakashi deadpanned, "Your father helped me and became like a new father for me after my father killed himself." Naruto retreated a step. "My father?" With awe in his voice, Kakashi began to describe his late sensei. "Your father. He was a great man. He was terrifyingly powerful, kind and loyal to a fault, and one of the most honorable men I have ever known," he said. The man he wanted to be had been Minato. Naruto was unable to comprehend that. More evidence was being provided by Kakashi to support Naruto's theory about his father's identity. "Who was he?" Naruto asked quietly, erasing the panic that had been on his face just a few seconds before. With the full intention of revealing his father's identity to Naruto and ignoring the repercussions, Kakashi started, "He was." But before he could reveal the information that would cost him his life, he was interrupted. "Kakashi. That's enough," Guy said, his voice losing its youthfulness and taking on a harsh tone. Guy glared at Kakashi, who returned the glare. Kakashi sighed, realizing that his longtime rival was correct, and Guy gave a slight shake of his head. Even though Kakashi knew Guy was correct, he didn't have to agree with it. "I'm sorry, Naruto," he said bitterly. Furious that he had just been given the chance to find out for sure who his father was, Naruto screamed, "Why the hell won't you tell me?" With a bitter tone in his voice, Kakashi explained, "That responsibility does not belong to me. Naruto, I want to tell you who your father was. But I can't. It's an SS-ranked secret and I could end up in T&I for telling you as much as I did." Naruto took a swallow. More proof, he thought. His voice remained flat as he said, "If you can't tell me, then who can?" He was so desperate that he couldn't show them how eager he was. That aspect of him was only visible to Hinata-chan. "Kakashi, your godfather, Jiraiya of the Sannin," replied. Since Jiraiya had put his career before his family, Kakashi had lost a lot of respect for him. Naruto swallowed. His theory was now all but indisputable, but he pushed the idea aside. Avoid getting worked up. Though he didn't believe it, Naruto told himself, I could still be wrong. Asking Kakashi questions helped Naruto divert his attention from his thoughts. He wanted to learn more about the man as a sensei and as the elder brother he claimed to be. Before delving deeper, he began by asking the standard questions, such as where you're from, how old you are, what your hobbies are, and so forth. Kakashi, pleased that his younger brother was taking this seriously, responded to the questions as if he were an open book. As the son of Konoha's White Fang, he told Naruto about his academy days and his accomplishments as the year's rookie. At a young age, he told him about making Chunin and then Junin, which led to a detailed account of his most recent mission with his entire team and how his best friend gave him his Sharingan eye. He then went on to describe how he had overlooked him while serving as an Anbu guard and how he had almost killed the Anbu member who had let two Uchihas seize him. In just 1 hour, Naruto received a crash course on Kakashi's tragic life. Though he mostly remained silent, Guy would occasionally step in or interrupt Kakashi from sharing too much information. He was happy that his friend and rival was at last having the opportunity to speak with his beloved younger brother in person, and he didn't want to spoil the moment, for once. After a brief pause, Naruto said, "One last question, Kakashi. Sensei," as he considered all the new details he had just discovered about the man. At the moment, he was reconsidering his entire viewpoint. Kakashi indicated that he would respond if he could by nodding. "You were the one who gave me the training scrolls, right?" Not surprised that Naruto had discovered him, Kakashi rubbed the back of his head and laughed. "Yeah, that was me." Naruto grinned slightly and said, "Thanks, I guess. If it weren't for those scrolls, I'd only be a third as strong as I am. So thanks Kakashi. Nissan." Kakashi had gained Naruto's trust twice over, even though he wasn't a trusting person. And if Kakashi lied, Guy would be yelling about how unyouthful it was, so Naruto knew it was true. Thus, Kakashi became one of the few individuals that Naruto valued. Unbeknownst to Naruto, Kakashi had been behaving like a brother to him. If he was correct, Kakashi likely contributed to the end of the academy teacher's sabotage by reassuring him about the scrolls when he was a child. He hoped to get to know Kakashi, even though he didn't. Kakashi's eyes widened in shock at the suffix. He had assumed that Naruto would have viewed him as a brother much more slowly. Kakashi wore his trademark eye smile as the shock subsided. "No problem Naruto, Entro." Guy, off to the side, was crying uncontrollably and muttering to himself about how young family reunions are. Guy went back to his own team after he stopped crying, while Kakashi and Naruto went back to Hinata and Kiba. Guy was only there because he believed Kakashi would be unable to keep from revealing some of Naruto's SS-ranked secrets. Though it wasn't as thick as it had been, Kakashi and Naruto walked back in silence. Both of them were content, so the silence was cozy. It took years for Kakashi to be accepted by Naruto, and he even had the opportunity to briefly introduce him to his parents. After learning that Kakashi had supported him for even longer than Hinata, Naruto had recently gained another valuable person. He wasn't depressed, despite the fact that he was still a little annoyed that his parents' identities had been revealed to him. All he intended to do was track down Jiraiya, validate his theory, and then mercilessly break every bone in his body for leaving him. When they got there, they watched Kiba take off in yet another attempt to become an expert tree walker. He managed to make it just over halfway before he started to slip and let out a loud curse. Hinata's mildly irritated expression made Naruto laugh a little, assuming Kiba had been stranded there ever since they left. Hinata said in a kind but reprimanding tone, "Kiba, your chakra surges the moment you get an inch higher. You need to stay calm." Though it lacked the same familiarity, it was a tone she frequently used on Naruto. Kiba complained, sorry, and then got up to try again, but he was stopped by Kakashi and Naruto. He uttered the words, "You two are done already?" That was a quick taijutsu lesson, with shock. He now believed that Kakashi had deceived him and kept him and Hinata a secret. Kakashi shrugged and said languidly, "Naruto is a quick learner, going back to his typical level of effort to be credible." Ignoring Kakashi, Hinata looked at Naruto inquisitively. His eyes conveyed the message, "I'll tell you later," as he smirked at her. Hinata demonstrated her understanding by nodding. As Kakashi observed the brief conversation, a wave of nostalgia overcame him. Since Sensei and Kushina, he hasn't seen two people so in unison. Despite the fact that his mother and sister frequently kept secrets from him, Kiba yelled, "Liar! You two are keeping secrets from us. There's no secrets in a pack." Naruto approached Hinata and remarked, "I doubt that," in a bored manner. Like his sister, Kiba wanted to argue, but he knew Naruto wouldn't tell him unless he wanted to. "Fine then. I didn't want to know anyways, ya, Teme," he said, turning around with a loud, HMPH. Naruto sneered. He turned to Hinata and said, "Whatever." He smirked and said, "Tell Hanabi to be here at 4. I'm leaving since my lesson is over." Though he was finished for the day, he would normally stay, but he needed some time alone to process the revelations. He needed to be by himself right now, but he intended to discuss it with Hinata later. Hinata's face briefly lit up with worry. She recognized the smirk Naruto would wear when he was dealing with a difficult situation, but it vanished as she nodded and said, "I will. Bye, Naruto. She would simply have to wait until Naruto said he would tell her later. After waving goodbye, Naruto vanished in a flurry of feathers. He had made a specific shunshin a few years prior. Alongside Hanabi almost skipped all the way to the 7th training ground. Why should she not be content? She made a significant breakthrough today to emerge from her sister's shadow. She was determined to show that she was superior to Hinata, even though she knew Naruto might be hesitant to train her as much as he did with Hinata. When she did, Naruto would be forced to give her more serious training, and she would undoubtedly eventually outperform her sister. By the time she arrived at Training Ground 7, Hanabi was giddy with anticipation, but it was dashed when she noticed a silly-looking child her own age near the training posts. "What are you doing here? My sensei and I have this training ground reserved. Leave," she said to the boy, her tone indicating that she was a Hyuga. Konohamaru's eyes narrowed. He snapped back, "Oi, you can't just tell me to leave, and I'm here to train with boss." Hanabi laughed. With an angry tone, she yelled, "I can tell you to do what I want, idiot. I'm a Hyuga." As though Konohamaru should get down on his knees and flee. Konohamaru was the next to scoff. "I know your clan. Bunch of Tamis. All of ya," Konohamaru sneered as he turned away. Hanabi lifted a fist, her forehead covered in a series of tick marks. She roared, "Don't insult my clan, peasant," and then struck Konohamaru's helmeted head with her fist. Hanabi ignored Konohamaru's slamming impact with the ground. Someone had just been punched by her. She gave the brat a punch. She had never used her fists before because she had always used her gentle fist style, so that was new to her. What made her do it now, then? Why did she automatically strike the peasant with a closed fist? When she heard a loud laugh behind her, she snapped out of her thoughts and realized it was Naruto. She said, "Naruto. Sensei," with a joyful tone before giving Konohamaru a little glare. She stated icily, "I was just dealing with this loser so we could begin training." Konohamaru turned to Naruto and yelled, "Whatcha callin' boss's sensei for? And who are you callin' an idiot?" Glaring at Hanabi, he demanded, "Tell this pale-eyed weirdo to get out of here so we can train, instead." It looks like I was right. This will be funny, Naruto thought wryly. He also needed it because he had been thinking about the possibility that his father was the Yondaime ever since Kakashi had brought up his father. They had nearly the same appearance, and since the Yondaime was a good man, he wouldn't just pick any kid at random. Kakashi informed him that his father had great power and that the odds were now nearly insurmountable. But Naruto refrained from making snap judgments. He didn't want to consider the possibility that he might be mistaken, which was always present, because he was unsure of his reaction if his father was indeed the Yondaime. He always pushed the idea of his ancestry away. Konohamaru appeared ready to give a loud protest, but Naruto turned to a smug-looking Hanabi and said, "Sorry Konohamaru, but I won't do that. And you should stop being so mean to your training partner." Silence fell. The two pupils shouted, "What?" and then glared at one another. They both shouted, "Stop copying me," together, but Naruto caught them by the rumple of their shirts before they could shout at one another again. He asked rhetorically, "Didn't I just say to stop fighting?" Konohamaru grumbled, "Why'd I have to train with her, boss?" Hanabi screamed, "Shut up, weirdo," and attempted to strike Konohamaru again, but Naruto drew them farther away before she could make contact. As the two kept arguing, Naruto just sighed. Konohamaru threatened, "You shut up or I'll tell my grandpa." Hanabi rolled her eyes. She sneered, "What's your grandpa going to do? Drool on me?" As he lunged at Hanabi, Konohamaru roared, "My grandpa's the Hokage, you jerk," but Naruto kept them apart as before. At that, Hanabi's eyes widened in surprise. Was this loser the proud Hokage's grandson? The shinobi god? The professor? The protagonist of the initial 2 shinobi battles? Hanabi tsked. Then the Sarutobi clan has fallen dramatically, monkey boy. Naruto shook them both before Konohamaru could reply. He said, "I said that's enough fighting," with such gravity. Smiling, they both said, "Sorry boss, sensei. I'm training you two out of the goodness of my heart, but I expect you to listen to me or I'll tell you to hit the road," he said, threatening to eject the two kids. "Now apologize." Their shoes piqued their interest, and they both tsked. "I'm sorry," they all said at once, but it wasn't particularly heartfelt. Naruto placed his hands on his hips and sighed once more. "It's a start at least. Now, give me 10,000 push-ups," he demanded. The two kids stared at Naruto. Konohamaru frantically waved his arms up and down, saying, "Are you crazy boss? We can't do 10,000 push-ups. We die." Hanabi gave a nod of agreement. "You can't?" asked Naruto in a perplexed tone. He crossed his arms and remarked, "Well, that ruins my plans for today. Well, get into a push-up position, then you wimps." Naruto made some adjustments with his feet after the two followed instructions, but once he was happy, he said, "Begin, and don't stop until I tell you to." As he watched them repeatedly perform the same motion, he soon grew bored and allowed his thoughts to wander. Naruto began to consider a number of topics, including what he and Hinata would do next, the fact that he had an older brother, and, finally, how he would feel if he were to prove his suspicions. Naruto did not despise the Yondaime, even though he knew he should have. He was aware that a Hokage must prioritize the village over friends, family, and everything else. Hokages occasionally had to give up something in order to defend the village, and they had to love it more than life itself. Among those sacrifices was Naruto. Naruto didn't believe he wanted to, and he didn't believe the Yondaime had been pleased that he had been made to seal Kurama inside of him. There was just nothing else to do. Thus, Naruto did not despise him. He was merely defending his beloved village from danger, and Naruto was a sacrifice that was required to keep the village safe. Naruto understood that he wasn't thrilled about being selected. Heck, some of the things Naruto would do to ensure Hinata's safety and happiness were far more impressive than sealing a tailed beast inside a child. As a father, Naruto was unsure if he could forgive the man. Naruto was unsure of his ability to forgive his hero. The world believed Konoha when he claimed to have killed an invincible beast. The Yellow Flash, the protagonist of the Third Shinobi War, is the only person to have ever had a flea-on-sight warning. Additionally, he was the one who encased his newborn son in the greatest tailed beast. To defend a group of narrow-minded idiots who fear and despise everything they don't understand, the man gave up his own flesh and blood. Naruto always pushed his feelings and thoughts away whenever he thought about the man who might be his father because he didn't believe he was capable of forgiving him. Naruto didn't want to harbor animosity toward the man he had worked so hard to become better than. Thus, Naruto suppressed his emotions before he even recognized them. Naruto didn't know and nearly hoped he never did. They might be forgiveness or unwavering hatred. His insistence that Kakashi tell him had been a sign of weakness. Naruto had given in to his curiosity and the temptation had been too strong. When Konohamaru collapsed loudly to the ground, unable to continue, Naruto's focus returned to reality. A second later, Hanabi followed suit. Naruto questioned mockingly, "Wah? You're already done? How many was that?" The two kids were rubbing their aching arms and huffing. "I did 64, Konohamaru exclaimed, giving Hanabi a derisive glare. Hanabi averted his gaze after displaying embarrassment. 62, she uttered while gritting her teeth. "I can't even beat Monkey Boy at push-ups, so it's no wonder my father believes I'm a failure." With shame in her heart, she thought shamefully. Using his pinky to clean his ear, Naruto remarked, "Wow, you both totally suck." Konohamaru, totally forgetting his fatigue, leapt to his feet and pointed at Hanabi, shouting, "We do not suck and I did more push-ups than her." Naruto tsked. You do too suck and you're forgetting that on average women have less brute strength than men do. So technically, she did like 10 more push-ups than you. Not that it really matters, you both still suck something fierce, he said with a bored voice as he crossed his legs. Hanabi smiled arrogantly at Konohamaru before she had an epiphany. "How many push-ups could you do when you were our age, sensei?" Naruto appeared to consider it. "With weights, a couple thousand. Without, 15,000 or so." "What? That's impossible," demanded Konohamaru. There was just no way. The boss was undoubtedly tough, but his statements had to be false. The sudden loud noise made Naruto wince. "It is too. My body heals no matter what I put it through. Doesn't matter if it's a sprained ankle, broken wrist, or a missing arm. My body will always heal sooner or later. Because of that I could train myself harder than you can imagine," he said, explaining that the agonizing workouts were nothing. Assuming that Naruto's training would be the most efficient way to outshine Hinata, Hanabi questioned, "Naruto. Sensei. Do you think you could train us like you did yourself?" "Yeah boss. Make us strong like you," Naruto yelled, "Absolutely not," and abruptly became serious. Hanabi couldn't help but notice that Naruto suddenly looked like her father as he widened his stance. But now Naruto appeared much more menacing. Konohamaru gulped, utterly unnerved by the abrupt personality shift of the boss. He stumbled as he said, "Why not be, boss?" Naruto stated gravely, "If I put you through the training Hinata-chan and I did, then you'd both die before the day was even over." That resonated with Hanabi. "If my sister can do it, then I can too. Train me like you did her," she pleaded. She could succeed if Hinata could. Hanabi fought the impulse to collapse and curl into a ball when Naruto's heavy gaze fell on her. It seemed as though training weights had just been strapped to her shoulders and chest and adjusted to their highest setting. Is his presence simply exerting pressure? Who is this guy? As the air around her abruptly became scarce, Hanabi thought in a panic. When he was serious, Naruto's authoritative voice sounded like that of the Hokage. "I told you no, you'll die," he said. Hanabi's teeth and hands clenched. She had no intention of this happening this way. She was supposed to be trained by Naruto after he realized she was more talented than her sister. Her scheme was failing. She roared, using a commanding tone reserved for nobles who weren't getting their way. "Then why did Hinata survive? I'm better than her. I can do it." For Hanabi, Konohamaru swallowed. He didn't think it was a good idea to yell at the boss because he was really frightening at the moment. However, he acknowledged that Hanabi had the courage to confront Naruto. Perhaps she was cool, for a girl. Naruto lowered his hands to his sides and uttered the words, "Because the two of you lack resolve," although he felt somewhat guilty for frightening the two children to the point where they appeared to be about to wet themselves. His statement was accurate. Their chances of surviving for more than a day were all but zero if they tried his training regimen. He wasn't exaggerating, despite what some might have assumed. Naruto anticipated that his trainees would challenge themselves to the limit. These two lacked the will to push past their boundaries and continue. They would either be killed or crippled as a result. "I have resolve," Hanabi protested, adopting a defiant posture. She would no longer live in her sister's shadow. Naruto tsked. "Yes, you have some resolve, but it's pathetic. It's like glass. Easily shattered," Naruto remarked curtly. Hanabi's fists clenched until they bled. She shouted, "You don't know anything about my resolve." Her sensei let out a sigh. Naruto said languidly, "You want to surpass Hinata-chan and gain your father's acknowledgement," before turning to Konohamaru, who swallowed. "And you want to prove to the village that you're not the honorable grandson but your own man. Not the worst motivation, but it's still weak." Naruto let out a loud sigh and reached into his pocket before either of them could explain why. He remarked, "Man, this is a lot less amusing than I had thought it'd be," and then he produced a tiny green scroll. Many years ago, he discovered the same one on his kitchen counter. "I had a feeling something like this would happen." He threw the tiny green to Hanabi, who gaped at him and the scroll with interest. "What's this, Naruto-sensei?" "It's a scroll," he deadpanned in a lighthearted manner, reversing his entire personality. He saw both of their we.can.see that expressions and gave a small laugh before continuing. "I can't be here every day to train you too. So in that scroll is your schedule. I don't expect you to be able to do all of what it tells you to do, but do as much as you can. Then you try to do more tomorrow and so on, understood?" He clarified and both of them nodded. He said, "Good, now I'm off to spend time with Hinata-chan. Try not to kill each other, okay? I don't need the headache," before turning to leave. He abruptly stopped. In a wise voice, Naruto said, "And since I'm in a good mood, I'll give you a hint about how to strengthen your resolves. A selfish resolve is a weak resolve," before vanishing in a flutter of feathers. Hanabi and Konohamaru exchanged a glance as they both thought, if the weakest person is selfish, then what is the strongest? Alongside Hinata at the dinner table, Hiyashi told his oldest daughter, "Lord Byakuya is coming next week and he'll be bringing his son with him. Akira wants to spend some time with you." Hanabi was out training, so it was just the two of them. At her father's words, Hinata hardly managed to resist the urge to moan and repeatedly smash her face against the table. The fact that noble females were married off like cattle to strengthen ties with other noble families was one aspect of being a noble that she detested above all else, despite her hatred of her clan's customs. It was extremely uncommon for a noble woman to marry for love. In order to elevate their status, their families sold them at auction for a profit, forcing them into a life of a loveless marriage. At the age of 10, she had a friend in the main branch who was married off to a fat, wealthy merchant who was 40 years old. Last year, that girl committed suicide. In the realm of politics, Hinata was no exception. Her dad was superior to most. If she claimed she didn't feel comfortable with her suitors, he wouldn't force her to go on several dates with them or pressure her to marry a particular man. He nevertheless forced her to go on dates with innumerable men in the hopes that she would be attracted to one of them. He ignored her attempts to explain that she had no interest in anyone. Even so, he made her spend time with the sleaze nobles because he believed that if they didn't, it would damage the Hyuga's reputation. She was pleased, though, that her father was directing the suitors toward her rather than Hanabi. In this manner, Hanabi would be protected from political corruption. She hated politics. "Oh, how? I see," was her reply. She was now considering how Naruto would rescue her from this situation. Hiyashi gave a nod. I will have a dress prepared for you according to what the date will entail. I know I do not have to say this, but I expect you to behave befitting of a Hyuga heiress, Hiyashi said in a tone that was cold. Hinata nodded once more, wishing the discussion would simply stop so she could go see Naruto-kun. He was taking her out to do something enjoyable because they hadn't really had time to spend together since graduation. Hiyashi concluded, observing the rapid range of emotions that crossed his daughter's face. Due to a certain outside influence, I will be assigning a guard to make sure you two are undisturbed, and they will be given permission to use deadly force. A blank mask follows in order of surprise, anger, outrage, and disappointment. Although he wasn't pleased with the emotions he witnessed, Hiyashi was proud that his daughter had nearly perfected emotional regulation. Hiyashi stated in a tone that brooked no argument, I know this upsets you, but as heiress, it is your responsibility to the clan. You will set aside your feelings and do what is expected of you. Hinata gave a rigid nod. She had to carry this weight to protect her younger sister, who detested her. It was an incredibly cruel world. Hiyashi said, good, and then got up to leave the room. Hyuga, the servant, heard a loud snap as she went to retrieve the dishes that the clan head had left behind. She glanced over in alarm and was shocked to see that Hinata had shattered her chopsticks while her eyes were stinging from rage. She whispered, barely audible, I hate that man, but the servant heard her. Feeling bold, she put the dishes down and put a gentle hand on the girl who was shaking. Her smile was slight. If I may, Hinata. Sama, you are just angry right now. We both know your blonde knight will rescue you, she said. Before grinning at the unidentified Hyuga, Hinata wiped away the tears that were starting to form. You think so? Of course, Hinata. Sama. Naruto-san is as stubborn as a mule and harder to move than a mountain. He won't let some pesky guard get in the way of his princess, she said with a slight chuckle. She was making fun of them both because they were totally unaware of each other's obvious affection. Hinata's face flushed unhealthily. She went as far as saying, Page P. Princess. YY.UT. T. Think. Before collapsing completely. A couple of hours later, as Hinata stood atop the Yondaime's head, the sun was about to set. It was their favorite location and where they frequently met. Both of them made the decision to concentrate on the positive memories despite the negative ones associated with the location. Hinata made her first stand here, and Naruto made his first real friend there as well. She whispered, Where are you, Naruto-kun? Before covering her eyes with two hands. He grinned as he said, Right here, Hinata-chan, in a loud whisper. As Hinata swatted the hands away, she couldn't help but smile. Naruto laughed a little. He walked backwards to the bench at the top of the hill and teased, Can you guess what I brought? Cinnamon buns? She inquired with hope, the mention of the sweet pastry causing her to forget all of the troubles of the day. Nope, Hinata lost hope. She didn't care if it wasn't a cinnamon bun. When Naruto noticed Hinata's abruptly dejected expression, he laughed. He waved his hands in front of Hinata's warm smile. Sorry, but the bakery was sold out and I know you don't like the store brand kind that much, so I got, he said. He suddenly found himself holding a gallon tub of vanilla ice cream and 2 spoons. Hinata smiled at the magic show. At one point, she considered using her Byakugan to observe how he did it, but she changed her mind. She liked the mystery and didn't want to ruin it. Before they both went to the bench and started scooping up ice cream, Naruto gave his friend a foxy smile as she started to clap lightly. As Hinata indulged in her favorite ice cream flavor, she inquired, How did Hanabi do today? Naruto casually remarked, I dunno, I left them my first scroll after I insulted their pathetic resolves, while he took another scoop. Hinata gave a sorrowful nod. She questioned, Do you think that'll work? She was aware that Naruto was attacking her sister's determination to defeat her for a reason. She had complete faith in Naruto and knew he wouldn't act in such a way without cause. Naruto appeared to consider it. I think so. If she finally realizes that surpassing you is a stupid goal, hopefully she'll finally figure out how much you love her and what you do to protect her, he replied with a sigh. Hinata also let out a sigh, hoping that this would finally heal the enormous rift in her family. You're sighing a lot more than usual, Naruto noted. He said, Something upset you, with a gleam in his eye that foretold the criminal would suffer for years. As Hinata started to describe how her father was pressuring her to take the dates seriously, she stifled another sigh. Naturally, she omitted the part where she nearly started crying, but she knew Naruto already knew without her having to say anything. Naruto abruptly lost his appetite for the nearly empty container, and his heart clenched painfully. He had 2 reasons for not marching to the Hyuga compound and tearing Haishi's head out of his ass. When Hinata told him about the first date, he nearly did, so she made him swear not to. Second, he was aware that he had no real influence over Hinata's romantic life. They were only friends in spite of all his wishes. He did, in fact, sabotage her dates, but only because she didn't like them. Her request that he refrain from interfering with a date was inevitable. On that day, Hinata would start focusing more on her fiancé and less on him. The one he cared about the most would gradually forget him. Like any old toy, he would be put away and eventually his parts would deteriorate until he broke like all the others. However, he would have to take on the burden if it meant protecting Hinata by becoming her broken toy, even if it made her happy. If it meant Hinata would continue to smile, he would live his entire life in silence. Hinata observed the abrupt change in her friend's disposition. Her eyes narrowed in worry as she said, "What's wrong, Naruto-kun?" Naruto instantly covered his sorrow with his trademark arrogant grin. "It's nothing, Hinata-chan. Just thinking how I'ma bail you out," he told the truth. Hinata gave a small frown. She knew when Naruto lied to her, which was not often. It seemed as though his eyes were pleading with her not to ask him what was truly wrong. Although Hinata wanted to sigh once more, she was considerate of her friend's privacy. Changing the subject, she said, "I'm sure it will be elaborate and hilarious. By the way, you never told me what Kakashi-sensei wanted to talk to you about." Presumably because Naruto was feeling down. But she didn't know why it would. "Not much. Only that he's my unofficial older brother that looked out for me since birth. Oh, and he's the guy that gave us the scrolls," Naruto blurted out while looking up. 3, 2, 1 Hinata shouted, loudly, "What?" At least to herself. She went on, "How did you not lead with that?" And then gave him a gentle poke in the shoulder. "Why didn't you say something earlier? That's way more important than my father trying to set me up with some noble." Naruto rubbed his shoulder and shrugged. He didn't have to say it out loud, but in his mind, Hinata's issues always came first. "I dunno. Slipped my mind I guess," he said haltingly, supporting his still horizontal head with his arms thrown behind it. Hinata appeared very depressed as her eyes grew softer. She detested the times when Naruto was acting in this manner. She wished he would prioritize himself occasionally, but she was grateful that he prioritized her above all else. When he recently received life-altering news, she felt like a bad friend, but he kept it a secret so she could gripe about her dysfunctional family. She made an effort to be a helpful friend, just as he was to her, but she felt as though she was taking advantage of Naruto when he refused to share his troubles with her. He gave her everything he had, and she gave him very little in return. Naruto's voice snapped her out of her melancholy reverie with the words, "It's almost time." As the sun started to set behind the village wall, Hinata's gaze turned to the village. Naruto and Hinata grinned together as they started counting down. 5, Naruto started. 4, went on Hinata. 3, 2, 1. Was the last number that Naruto uttered, and at that precise moment, the sun sank beneath the village wall. The village entered a period of darkness. The ice cream and spoons flew as Naruto and Hinata both screamed, "Banzai!" and leapt from their seats. The instant the word left their lips, the village emerged in a stunning medley of colored lights, just like the sun. After laughing together and exchanging foolish smiles, Naruto and Hinata sat down again and started talking about what Kakashi and Naruto had discussed. But they sat down a little closer than they had previously. They both didn't mind. Naruto sighed in frustration and dropped his paintbrush into the bucket. He said, "I really hate chores," to his teammates in the back. Akamaru yipped back from his perch atop Kiba's head as he grunted as he began to peel off the dried paint that had essentially covered him. Silently nodding, Hinata checked to make sure she was clean of paint. "Just 10 more until you get AC rank," Kakashi said as he read his book comfortably on a picnic table. Nearly a week had passed since Team 7 was established and began to dominate the ninja community. They had achieved more than 15 D ranks in the previous week. They completed 2 or even 3 each day, which put them ahead of their fellow graduates who had only completed 4 or 5. Kakashi had determined that the Green Genin would not require teamwork exercises. The only significant issue with Hinata and Naruto's nearly perfect teamwork was when Kiba contested Naruto's leadership of the fellow Genin. Naturally, Kakashi remained the team leader, but each squad usually had a Genin who led his fellow members in unimportant tasks or in the event that their Junin instructor wasn't available. Kiba didn't bring up the challenge because he believed Hinata would be upset with him for assaulting her friend, but Naruto had disregarded it. Kiba continued to struggle for the role of team leader, but he kept his composure during missions to ensure that their collaboration remained steady. Of course, it could be better, but overcoming obstacles together was the best way to strengthen their relationship. In order for his team to begin applying for missions with a C ranking, Kakashi was completing the required minimum of 25 D-ranked missions. The three of them were already far ahead of their fellow graduates, and as Kakashi continued to transform the pointless tasks into training exercises, the gap grew even wider. They had to avoid enemy kunais, which were actually thin paintbrushes dipped in paint, while concentrating on painting a civilian's fence in today's simulation. As previously stated, despite being struck a few times, Kiba was still passable. Naruto only had one spot on his forearm, where he had pushed Kiba to keep a paintbrush from striking Akamaru, and Hinata was immaculate because of her Kekkei Genkai. Naruto became one of Akamaru's favorite people. As Akamaru yelled in support of his master, Kiba complained, "Why do we have to do these lame mock missions, Kakashi? Sensei? Everyone knows that we're too badass for him." Naruto sat down at the picnic table and gave a sage response, "Because we're very fresh genin, kibbles. Would some princess really trust us to protect her if we've only been genin for less than a week?" Kiba complained about how unfair everything was, but he knew Naruto had a point, so he didn't argue. He simply prayed to Kami that his mother and sister would never hear of Naruto's nickname for him, which he had grown accustomed to for a long time. To commit seppuku would be the only way to relieve that degree of embarrassment. After giggling, Hinata and Kiba sat down as well. They were awaiting payment from their client for a job well done. Kiba sat down and said, "So what are we doing after this, sensei? Training or another lousy D rank? I have a bit of a treat for you three today. We're having a group sparring match with the other rookie genin," Kakashi announced. The decision to match up their cute genin against one another had been made the day after the true genin test. Rewind as their teams were the only ones to pass, Kakashi, Kurenai, and Asuma stood in the Hokage's office. The fact that only 3 teams had advanced this year made the Hokage suppress a sigh. To merely increase Kohona's numbers, he was seriously thinking of strapping a few Junin and special Junin with reserved genin. 13 years ago, the Kyuubi attack dealt a serious blow to their numbers, and since then, their intake of shinobi has decreased even more due to work deaths and failed graduates. Is there an issue with the academy? Are they failing to adequately prepare the next generation? Unaware that he was right on the money, Hiruzen asked himself in silence. But he put his thoughts aside and concentrated on the meeting he was in at the moment. He ordered, "Asuma, begin your report." "My 3 passed easily enough," Asuma said, nodding. They were able to pin me down long enough to draw blood at the 2-hour mark, which was their goal. Of the 3, Ino is without a doubt the leader. It was going to take a lot of effort to get her to change her fangirl mentality, but she can concentrate on the task at hand when necessary. She's loud, brash, and a fangirl, he sighed. I suppose her skills are adequate. Her only jutsu is mind transfer jutsu, and she has a moderate level of accuracy and stealth. Choji is soft, quiet, and perceptive. As a follower, he essentially follows the instructions of the other 2. To be honest, he isn't suited for the life of a shinobi. They would have had me at the hour mark, but Choji had refused to strike me. He said he didn't like hurting others. That's a major problem in our line of work. His skills are moderate from the academy reports. I can't verify them because Choji wasn't used for stealth. He can use one of his clan jutsus but can expand his body at will. Shikamaru is lazy, energetic but brilliant. Like Choji, he's a follower but he can take the lead when needed. He's a strategist and I know for a fact that the academy test scores do not reflect his true abilities. However, as I said before, he's incredibly lazy and anything involving actual work is troublesome. He can use one of his clan's jutsus but I think he may be able to learn a few more if I can get some motivation in the kid. Asuma closed his report by sighing. He would have more work to do because it would take a lot of effort to get these kids in shape. Hiruzen suppressed a sigh of disappointment. By no means were the few who passed perfect shinobi. In the hopes that her team would improve, he gestured for Kurenai to start her report. Already shattering the Hokage's hopes, Kurenai nodded and started. My team barely made it through. They wanted to find me and apprehend me, and while they were successful, it was more luck than skill. The one-man show is Sasuke Uchiha. He doesn't get along with other people and feels that they would only hinder him, so he shouldn't even bother. He's strong for a genin, though, so I'll give him that. He rushed me head on, despite the fact that he currently has little to no tracking abilities, and he ignored the other 2 for the majority of the test. He appeared to be quite skilled in his family style of taijutsu when I had stopped and sparred with him. Additionally, he was barely winded after using Fire Release, Grand Fireball Jutsu. After we awaken his Sharingan and he gains some more jutsu experience, he will be a fantastic heavy hitter for the team. Sakura Haruno is very much like Ino without the ability to focus on the mission. She abandoned Shino to chase after Sasuke. Her skills are abysmal. Despite having a high aptitude for chakra control and genjutsu, I took her out of commission with ease when I used a D-ranked genjutsu, she murmured. Since Sakura was next in line for Kunoichi of the year, she assumed she would be at a much higher level than she was, but it appeared that her book smarts were the only reason. Shino is antisocial but not a one-man show like Sasuke. He tried to get them to cooperate at first, but it didn't work out because Sasuke believed he was going to slow him down and Sakura would follow his example. Shino is composed and reasonable, and because of his bugs, he is already capable of tracking. He is undoubtedly a long-range fighter, but as far as I can tell, his bugs are consuming his chakra network, preventing him from using any jutsu. They only made it through because of Shino. When I escaped after our encounter, Sasuke realized he couldn't follow me alone, so he used Shino to follow me and the two of them temporarily joined forces to capture me. Kurenai concluded. Sakura was still unconscious. Like Asuma, she was aware that she would have her work cut out for her. As he started his report, Kakashi forced himself not to smile. My adorable little genin were fantastic. I nearly went overboard with the brats. He smiled, making the other two Junin in the room stare at him as if he were crazy. Asuma said, "You're not joking," with a tone of surprise. "No, I'm not. The little brats almost killed me." He shuddered as he pictured a spiraling ball in a chakra hand pointing at his stomach. A couple of times. Kurenai couldn't believe it. Kakashi was one of the village's strongest ninja, making genin at age 5, Chunin at age 6, and Junin at age 12. 3 genin couldn't possibly take him on and make him give it his all. Kurenai's expression of disbelief prompted Kakashi to elaborate, saying, "As you are all aware, my test is all about teamwork, and they passed with flying colors. Kiba is hot-headed, defiant, and seems to have a habit of rushing in, but due to his pack instincts he's able to take orders. Though, he may just be following instructions because he has a crush on Hinata," he said with thought. However, he didn't think the crush would last long. Kurenai arched an eyebrow when Hinata was brought up. She didn't think Kiba was deserving of her sister, and she was still upset that she wasn't on her team. Although he didn't really get to use many of his clan's techniques, he is strong for a genin, possibly high genin or low chunin in taijutsu, and I've heard he has a great nose that can be used for tracking. Hinata is quiet and perhaps a little reserved, but she is composed, self-assured, and slightly brutal in battle. With those senbon of hers, she transformed a number of unfortunate logs into pincushions. Additionally, she works extremely well with Naruto. She showed off the chakra control that the Hyuga are known for when she displayed water walking and has terrifying accuracy. She managed to hit my Tenketsu with her senbon and I'm guessing that she has a few more tricks up her sleeve. Naruto is somewhat hostile toward Kiba, but he is incredibly loyal, kind, and caring when he is with Hinata. In reality, Kakashi was saying, "I hope he doesn't reject me from his life. He seems to push away everyone that isn't Hinata, but I'm hoping that I can work on that and get him to open up to his fellow squad members. He's defiantly not at genin level from what I saw." In spite of Hinata's entreaties, Kurenai didn't really like Naruto. It wasn't personal, but she saw him as a nuisance who would only make Hinata feel worse. She knew he wasn't the dead last he seemed to be, but she didn't think he was any better than the middle of the class. Kurenai stifled a smug smile at that. Being the heiress of a powerful clan and, more significantly, her younger sister, Hinata only wanted the best for herself, and Naruto was just not the best. I haven't even witnessed a third of his tricks yet, and he's much closer to Junin level. Kakashi claimed that he only really employed one jutsu, which was an enhanced Rasengan. 3, 2, 1, what? You mean Naruto is at Junin level? What the devil is that? Kurenai essentially shouted. I'm not claiming that he's an SS rank shinobi or anything, but if my estimation is accurate, he's definitely in the high B to high A rank. He might have something unique up his figurative sleeve because, as I mentioned, I haven't really seen any of his tricks, Kakashi laminated. Satisfied that there was at least one good team among the group, Hiruzen smoked his pipe and became even more so upon learning about Naruto. You mean a variant of the Rasengan? How did he make it better? The entire village would have undoubtedly seen such a jutsu from the training grounds. Minato had predicted that the final Rasengan would be a S-ranked jutsu easily, so if he had used it, the entire village would have known. Hiruzen asked, he knew Naruto hadn't added an element yet. It is never appropriate to use a jutsu like that on a comrade. He turned it into a long-ranged attack, nearly hit me with it too. I should probably talk to him about that, he added after the fact. A long-range Rasengan was actually one of the variations that his late successor had tried to make but had failed to figure out, and Hiruzen appeared to take pleasure in this. But was it true? Did Naruto actually perfect one of the Yondaime's legendary techniques? If so, Kakashi was correct. Naruto was far ahead of being a mere genin. Asuma appeared thoughtful. He had been a Junin for a lot longer than Kurenai and had witnessed children half his age being stronger than him, so he was much more open-minded. "Asuma, you think he's real?" Kurenai inquired, observing the contemplative expression on his face, but Kakashi cut him off before he could respond and risk upsetting her. "Is it truly that difficult to believe?" Kakashi asked rhetorically because he was bothered by her doubting Naruto's abilities and a little offended that she believed he was lying. "Yes, it is difficult to accept. Since joining the academy, he has been the last person to die. I am aware that he has been reserving his abilities, but it is absurd to claim that he has been doing so," she replied, drawing a displeased one-eyed glare from Kakashi. "Naruto has easily tricked me and everyone else in this village. He has degraded civilians, Anbu, Junin, Chunin, and Genin in this village. Do you honestly think he won't hold back his abilities in order to join Hinata's team?" Kakashi inquired, sounding a little irritated. Kurenai flatly denied, her eyebrow twitching once more in frustration. "I won't believe it until I see it," she said. "How about a spar with our adorable little Genin?" Kakashi proposed, team versus team, but Kurenai was already shaking her head no. "Not one team against another. My team is in disarray at the moment, regardless of whether you are telling the truth about Naruto. Because of Hinata and Kiba, you would most likely win even if he died last. Genin versus Genin, what about it? In this manner, we can precisely compare their abilities to one another." She turned to Asuma and asked, "Want to come in? Shoji might benefit from sparring," she inquired. After a brief pause, Asuma said, "Sounds fine to me. We'll do it at the end of the week." Kurenai grinned. "In this manner, we both have some time to practice and discover our Genin's strengths." Kakashi turned to face the Hokage and said, "You're taking command of what was my idea, but sure, but would that be all, Hokage?" Sama, feeling somewhat disregarded, Hiruzen nodded and sighed. "That's it. You're fired." The end of the flashback. Kiba began to cheer when Kakashi explained the match's specifics. Essentially, it would be similar to the ones they had in the academy, but since this would be their first time as shinobi, Kiba was very excited. With a slight smile on her face, Hinata was eager to see how far her classmates had progressed since joining the shinobi forces. On the inside, Naruto was excited to crush a certain Teme since he was no longer forced to hold back, despite his expressionless exterior. "Slow down, Kiba." Naruto laid his head on the table and stretched his neck, which was starting to get tight from staring at the sky, saying, "You'll exhaust yourself." Kiba sat down despite the sneer. Their client, an elderly and weathered man who had clearly been a farmer for the majority of his life, joined them a few moments later. "Oh. Although it was a little strange to have everyone hurling paintbrushes at one another, you three did a fantastic job. This is your salary." As he gave Kakashi a small stack of bills, he spoke in a grandfatherly tone, saying, "Try not to spend it all in one place." As he made his way back to his house a short distance away, he called out to them. In contrast to higher ranked missions, Naruto eyed the bills and suppressed a sigh. The shinobi who finished the missions were paid directly by the client. They were simply paid so little that using a middleman was not worth the trouble. He moaned to himself, "That's barely enough for 5 bowls of ramen." He knew that if he didn't start receiving a good wage soon, he would have to turn to cannibalism or theft once more. He grumbled as he accepted his meager pay, but perhaps surprised wasn't the best word to describe his reaction when Hinata handed him her stack of bills. This wasn't the first time she had offered him her pay. He smiled kindly at her, saying, "You keep it up, Hinata-chan. I'm all right. Anyone who was thinking about cannibalism was definitely not okay," he said. But instead of taking the bills away, Hinata gave Naruto-kun a worried but severe expression, saying, "You're not okay. I hear the rumbling in your stomach. I am an heiress from a clan. I don't need it nearly as much as you do," she said in a tone that suggested she was going to like it. Naruto sighed after glancing down at the bills and then back up at Hinata. "Are you certain, Hinata-chan?" Naruto asked. "I know you don't like using your clan's money to buy things," and received a nod and a smile in response. Hinata grinned at Naruto as he accepted the bills, blushing in embarrassment. They failed to notice Kiba's conflicted expression as he watched the brief exchange with great interest. Afterwards, at Training Ground 7 when Team 7 arrived at their training ground, they were taken aback to discover that, with the exception of Kakashi, the other 2 teams had already arrived. "You're running late. We've been waiting for 2 hours, Ino yelled. Sakura and her friend shouted. "Oh, apologies. There are many twists and turns on the road of life. I suppose we simply got lost." Kakashi patted Naruto on the head and congratulated himself, "I'm an amazing sensei," while the 2 Junin in attendance glared bloody murder at Naruto, who appeared incredibly happy with himself for beating him to the punch. "So how are we going to do this?" Asuma asked his fellow Junin after they had all calmed down. He inquired. After giving it some thought, Kakashi said, "I dunno, picking numbers? Allow them to select their opponents?" he asked out loud to himself. As he looked down, he noticed that was the group's common response. Ino glared at Sakura, who, surprisingly, was ignoring her, while Sasuke and Kiba both glanced at Naruto, who was looking up at the clouds with Shikamaru without either of them paying attention. Kakashi glanced at his allies, thinking, maybe we should let the rivals duke it out now so it won't cause problems down the road. Asuma and Kurenai exchanged a look before nodding, both of them agreeing with Kakashi's reasoning. Alright, so this is how it will be. Sakura versus Ino. Choji versus Hinata, Shino versus Shikamaru. Naruto versus Kiba and Sasuke in a handicap match, Kakashi declared, using the competition to demonstrate how much better Naruto was than Genin. Sakura got a smug grin from Ino, who said, "Are you prepared to lose?" To her chagrin, Sakura disregarded her and proceeded toward a tiny clearing that would serve as the battlefield. The others watched in idle curiosity, expecting a protracted slug match that, to be honest, tarnished Kunoichi's reputation. Asuma, the match's proctor, glanced at each side and said, "Are you two prepared?" he asked and got nods in return. "Begin?" As he leapt back, he said. Sakura began by launching a flurry of kunai and shuriken at her longtime adversary. "Is that all you got, Billboard?" Ino would have insulted further, but the sounds of horrified screams interrupted her. She was startled by the display of ruthlessness, but she was able to dodge in time without getting hit. As her mind slowly processed what she was seeing, Ino could only gape as she spun around and saw what had caused the screams. There was Sasuke, a bloodied and dying Sasuke, right where she had escaped the volley of shuriken and kunai. Abruptly, Ino ran in the direction of Sasuke and the group that surrounded him, all of them whispering to one another about what they ought to do. "Oh no, this isn't possible," Ino yelled to her fallen love, crouching down and crying over his wounded form. Tears flowed out of her eyes as she tried to stop the bleeding, but it was to no avail. Her attention snapped up to those around her. "Get help! ACT now!" she screamed and would have gone on if Sasuke hadn't reached up feebly and wiped away a tear. He uttered the words weakly, spitting blood up with each one. "Ino. I, cough, have something. I have to tell you." Sasuke was too weak to speak clearly, so Ino leaned down, her eyes blurring with more tears, her ear hovering over his mouth, and feeling his hot breath tickle her ear as he said, "I win Ino. Pig." Sasuke, who sounded just like Sakura, said triumphantly. Ino realized she was kneeling over nothing and holding Sakura's kunai at her throat when the genjutsu broke. "What?" Ino inquired bewilderedly. "I placed you in a genjutsu that showed you your worst fear," Sakura said simply, removing her kunai as Asuma proclaimed her the match's winner. Sakura grinned at her. It had been the complete opposite of what they had anticipated, and everyone but her team was stunned by how quickly the match went by. Whoa! Who would have guessed Sakura could win so quickly? Although he was a little let down that he was not able to witness a catfight between two attractive girls, Kiba was impressed that Sakura had defeated Ino with hardly any effort. That was practically an immediate victory. When did Sakura start to cause even more trouble? Shikamaru asked out loud. As Sakura ran joyfully to her team after defeating her longtime rival, she ignored Ino's insults and insistence that the fight was far from over. Sakura completely brushed past Sasuke and came to a halt in front of her sensei, leaving everyone speechless. "How did I do, Kurenai?" "Sensei." With a tone akin to a child demonstrating an action to a parent, she inquired. Kurenai grinned at Sakura and said, "Wonderful, Sakura, at last, you're taking responsibility for your abilities." She spoke with genuine pride as she said it. Kurenai was relieved that her conversation with Sakura had taken hold. Rewind: the kids were fantastic on paper, but in reality, they were just two lone wolves and a fangirl. Not the best combination for a team. Kurenai glanced at her genin and suppressed a frustrated sigh. "You can all go except for you, Sakura," she said, pinching the bridge of her nose, intending to break Sakura's fangirl habit right then and there. Sakura looked up at her sensei with a confused expression after Sasuke and Shino had both nodded and left. Since she didn't believe she had done anything wrong to warrant being held back, she asked, "Did I do something wrong, sensei? Just to be certain." "Why did you turn into a shinobi, Sakura?" With a serious tone, Kurenai inquired. Sakura became confused by the question. Why did I become a shinobi?" She replied, her tone as uncertain as day, "Because my dad was one before the Kyuubi killed him. I guess I wanted to honor him." Kurenai nodded, believing the girl had turned into a shinobi in order to win Sasuke over. That's a good excuse, but do you really believe that your behavior honors him? Sakura was shocked when she made the demand. The way I'm behaving? Sensei, what are you talking about? Sakura inquired, her voice becoming irritated as she felt insulted. I'm referring to your fangirl nonsense, Sakura. Do you really believe that by ignoring your training to impress Sasuke with your figure, you are honoring your father? Do you believe that by starving yourself and going on a diet when you ought to be eating twice as much as a civilian, you are honoring your father? Are you even aware of what being a kunoichi means? Kurenai sighed in excruciating frustration before Sakura angrily retorted, even though Kurenai was practically screaming at the end. Do you understand why there are only a third as many female ninja, Sakura? Kurenai, who was prepared to do whatever it took to influence Sakura's behavior, asked in a very serious tone. Sakura's irate response dried up in her mouth, because sexual-related crimes are more common against women than they are against men in the field, she said, recalling information that all kunoichi were aware of. That's exactly what the textbook says, Kurenai said, nodding. Now that you know that, why haven't you taken the appropriate safety measures to prevent that from happening to you? She asked, her voice full of curiosity and disappointment rather than anger. Sakura hesitated for a moment before coming up with a firm response. Because Sasuke-kun will save me, she said as if it were a given. 100% of the time? Kurenai asked, raising an eyebrow. Sasuke will save you, she said, and got a nod. One more nod. Before Sakura could respond or defend herself, Kurenai grabbed her right breast nipple firmly, found it somehow through her bra and shirt, between her thumb and pointer finger fingernails, and gave it a vicious pinch. More than in pain, Sakura's scream was one of surprise. Sensei, let me go. What are you doing? She screamed as she attempted to push Kurenai's hand away, but her hold was iron-like, and she was starting to squeeze harder. Although Kurenai did not enjoy or take pride in hurting her student, she felt that it was better to suffer a little than to be killed or used as a sex toy by an enemy ninja. Why am I acting in this way? Where is he? Is a better question. Sakura had stopped struggling by this point, and it seemed that the harder she struggled to escape, the harder her sensei pinched, leaving her unable to do anything but grit her teeth at the excruciating pain in her breast. Kurenai said this as she increased the pressure. What? Sakura's eyes welled up with tears of confusion and rage as she asked, her voice heavy with emotion. Where is Sasuke, who you claimed would always save you? Kurenai inquired once more. As Kurenai went on, Sakura suddenly realized, you're powerless and he's not coming, Sakura. I would be doing much more than just pinching your nipple if I were an enemy shinobi. I would be violating you if I were an enemy shinobi. As we ruthlessly violated you in unspeakably horrific ways, I would be passing you around to my friends if I were an enemy shinobi. With her nails nearly touching and Sakura barely holding back a scream, Kurenai said, gradually applying pressure to make her point. In addition to the excruciating pain in her breast, Sakura was crying uncontrollably now because she was aware of what Kurenai was going to say. And you'd be totally vulnerable to us. Your body is weak because you opted to diet and forego exercise. You didn't learn how to defend yourself because you chose to waste your time staring at a boy. As Sakura sobbed while massaging her battered breast, Kurenai let go of her hand. Kurenai let out a sorrowful sigh and gave Sakura a gentle shoulder rub. Sakura, your potential is incredible. You could be a fantastic medical ninja or a genjutsu expert, like I am, with your chakra control, but don't waste all that skill just to let a boy down. Kurenai calmed her agitated student by saying, he's not worth it. No boy is. She felt bad about having to do that, but it was ultimately for her protection. Sakura felt as though she had spat on her father's grave, and she was silent for a long time after her sobs stopped. She intended to be a shinobi first and try to impress Sasuke with her skills, but she knew that she had no skills to speak of, so she blew off the entire physical aspect of being a shinobi so she could ogle Sasuke. How had she allowed her crush on Sasuke to get in the way of her original goal? How had she strayed so far from the path she had wanted to walk? Sakura finally calmed down 30 minutes later. Sensei, could you teach me genjutsu? Since she was a shinobi first and needed to learn self-defense or else she would end up like Kurenai just described, she asked, determined to make up for lost time, even if it meant giving up her crush for Sasuke. Of course, be here an hour early for your first lesson, Kurenai said with a smile. Final flashback. Hinata and Choji made their way to the tiny field as everyone applauded Sakura's victory, including Sasuke. Hinata gave Choji a small smile as they faced each other, acknowledging her apparent hesitation. You don't have to be afraid of hurting me, Choji, she said in a comforting voice. Choji's nerves weren't particularly affected. But I could, he said, conflicted. I don't want to hurt my friends. Asuma. Sensei had claimed that sparring with your friends would make both you and them stronger, but Choji found it hard to get past the whole hit your friends part. You won't harm me, Choji. Naruto-kun is really strong, and I've been training with him for a very long time, so, please don't hold back. As she assumed one of her stances, she smiled kindly. Asuma chose to offer a reward after Choji paused. Choji, if you give this match your all, I'll buy you an all-you-can-eat buffet at your choice of restaurant. Start now. As he leapt back, he said. Nothing happened for a second before Choji unexpectedly acted. Expansion Jutsu. He screamed as he swelled up into a huge ball. To give herself space to avoid what would come next, Hinata instantly leapt back a few feet. Human bullet tank. Soon after, Choji started to spin before taking off, and those were the words that came next. To avoid Choji, Hinata leapt high into the air, senbon between each knuckle, and her dojutsu activated. Thinking that if he had a few senbon protruding from him, he would be forced to stop spinning, Hinata threw her senbon, but to her surprise, Choji was spinning so quickly that the needles simply bounced off him. As Hinata gracefully descended back to earth, her eyes narrowed, already formulating several possible plans. With a spectacular turn, Choji charged Hinata once more like a raging bull, but Hinata was ready. She leapt forward, startled everyone but Naruto, turned around in midair, and started throwing volleys of seemingly endless senbon. What is she doing? It's going to crush her. Everyone heard Naruto scoffing as Kiba yelled, worried about his crush. What the hell is your problem? Do you not fear that Hinata-chan will suffer harm? Kiba insisted. Do you really have so little faith in Hinata-chan? Naruto sighed once more. He pointed to the match and instructed him to watch it, saying, Choji won't lay a finger on her. Just as Choji was about to crush her, Hinata landed and turned around, but he was attempting to slow down. Smirking to herself, Hinata took 2 elegant steps to dodge to the left, but it didn't even look like she was dodging. Rather, it looked like she was dancing like a ballerina. The younger girls were jealous of Hinata, and Kiba, who was only 12, said, Wow. Hinata-chan sure is flexible. With a perverted blush on the bridge of his nose. He was going through puberty, which meant that he had perverted ideas about girls. Continue that line of thought and I'll neuter you, dog breath, Kiba said, turning around as he heard Naruto crack his knuckles behind him and glaring at his squadmate, promising death. With a loud gulp, Kiba turned around, sweating profusely, and everyone laughed at his expense. Even though Choji was spinning quickly, he could still see the senbon stick sticking out of the ground and aimed at him. Although he could repel things like senbon when he was spinning so fast that they just bounced off of him, he didn't think he would be able to avoid being impaled by the needles if he rolled over them. Choji raced past Hinata, despite his efforts to slow down, and straight towards the trap she had set up. Naturally, he flew over the needles and disabled his expansion jutsu when he got too close. The onlookers flinched as Choji fell on his face, and he continued to tumble until he came to a complete stop nearly 30 yards from where he had stopped the jutsu. Oh no! As Choji struggled to stand up because of the numerous minor wounds that now covered his body, he said, cupping his injured face. Are you alright, Choji? Asuma inquired, feeling both proud of himself for taking the initiative and aware that Choji should probably step aside while he was still in the lead. Choji, believing he was going to eat Asuma. Sensei broke after this match, said, Yeah. I'm fine, as he assumed a fighting stance once more. Would you like to go on? Hinata walked up and asked. After spending years with Shikamaru, his intelligence and foresight had sort of rubbed off on Choji, who knew that the human bullet tank jutsu was actually the only ace he had and Hinata had countered it. He only knew academy jutsu other than his clans, and those wouldn't help him, so he had no choice but to quit since he had nothing else to throw at Hinata. Choji considered it for a moment before shaking his head no. Hinata gave him a smile and said, Choji, you did great. As she assisted Choji in sitting down, she said, Now let me take care of your wounds. Then, using a glowing green hand, she started to examine Choji's body and treat his minor injuries. Both Asuma and Kakashi were impressed, though the latter assumed that Hinata had medical experience based on her remarks on the lake. Looking at his mess of a team, he thought, so apparently Kakashi got an A-ranked genin and a medic.nin? He was surprised, but his thoughts quickly turned gloomy. Some guys just get all the luck, Asuma thought. Although it had only been a week, he knew it would take a lot of work to get his 3 in order. I'll ask her after this is over, and maybe I'll do whatever Kurenai did to straighten Sakura out. Shikamaru and Shino left for the field after Hinata was proclaimed the winner and had healed Choji, and Hinata and Choji returned. Hinata. Chan, you did fantastically. I had faith in your ability. Hinata could see Naruto mouthing that Kiba was lying behind his back, despite Kiba's wide smile. She said courteously, "Thank you, Kiba," and then she sat down next to Naruto, who was essentially echoing her. "I'll show the Teme who's top dog around here," Kiba thought as he turned to watch Shikamaru and Shino's match after watching the small display and feeling a wave of jealousy rise in his chest. Asuma glanced between the two boys, one of whom was standing there, anticipating the start of the match, and the other yawning. Asuma sighed. He knew exactly how this was going to unfold. Start, he didn't even bother to jump back when he said that. When our favorite Nara said, "I forfeit," it was only a half-second later. Everyone's faces went up, with the exception of Asuma, Kakashi, and Naruto, who were the few who saw it coming. That lazy son of a. Sakura nodded in agreement with her friend, but Ino growled in frustration that her teammate could be so lazy that he would actually forfeit a match so he wouldn't have to fight, not to mention that he was also on her team. That's it. Not even a fight broke out, although they were both long-range fighters. Kiba was curious to see which clan technique was superior, so he roared angrily to see how that fight would play out. Kurenai said to herself, "Wow. Asuma was right, that kid lives up to his clan's reputation." Hinata muttered to herself, "I didn't know Shikamaru was that lazy," but her friend overheard her. When Naruto said, "It's not just because he's incredibly lazy that he quit," some people around him gave him perplexed looks. "Oh, you also noticed?" Kakashi said, sounding as though he were disclosing a secret. "You see, sensei?" Kiba inquired, unsure of what the hell they were discussing. Kakashi simply indicated that they should listen to Shikamaru's defense by pointing at him. Asuma let out a sigh and said, "Shikamaru? I was expecting that, but it didn't make it any less annoying," he asked in a frustrated tone. "How troublesome. I would have lost in the end no matter what, so why bother wasting all that time?" Shikamaru sighed as he noticed the unclean look Shino was giving him despite the fact that the majority of his face was covered. Shikamaru replied. Although he completely understood Shikamaru's reasoning, Shino raised an eyebrow because he was curious to know why he did what he did. "Although we both fight at long range, Shino and I have quite different fighting styles. Shino can be restrained by my shadow binding jutsu, and I might even be able to make him give up, though that is unlikely. However, I am unable to bind every Kakaichu that is inside of him. Since they obey his commands, he could easily release a swarm while I restrained him, draining me of my chakra," Shikamaru laminated. Shino nodded, as he had done ever since he learned who he would be facing. With a sigh, Asuma declared, "Victory goes to Shino," embarrassed that all of his teammates had lost. Everyone cheered Shino on his victory as he and Shikamaru returned to the group, and they all laughed when Ino started verbally tearing Shikamaru a new one. He tried to defend his position, but it didn't work, so he just stood there and listened to his teammates shouting and mumbling about unruly blondes. But as they moved toward the middle of the clearing with Naruto, who appeared perfectly content to engage in combat with two opponents, two genin were ignoring them, both of them thinking along the same lines, but for different reasons. "Once I crush Naruto, Teme, Hinata, Chan will realize he's a complete loser and go out with me," Kiba thought excitedly, demonstrating his complete ignorance of the other gender. As he recalled the first time Naruto had thrown a match, Sasuke thought, "I get to fight you again, Naruto. You better stop holding back so I can crush you and prove that I am superior." Rewind after nearly a month of Naruto's arm breaking in the conversation with his older brother, Sasuke stood in the center of the circle, finally being allowed to spar by the teachers. Many were taken aback by how quickly the boy's behavior changed. It seemed as though he had changed completely. His haughtiness had been severely reduced. It still existed and occasionally came to the surface, but only infrequently. Sasuke became kinder, smiled more, and even made some friends. Even though he no longer made fun of people for being inferior, he still had a bit of his bully tendencies, but they were a combination of his superiority complex and inferiority complex, and he picked on some children, including Naruto, Hinata, and Shino, for very different reasons. Despite his outward lack of interest in the action, Naruto was yelling inside about the injustice of what he was about to do as he entered the middle of the ring. "Make the symbol showing that you wish to spar," Iruka said, glancing between the two kids, and they did as he said. "I'll win this time. I have to accept that it's for Hinata, Chan's protection." Start. In a clash of blows, Naruto and Sasuke meet in the center, but Naruto appeared lethargic in contrast to his earlier battle with the Uchiha. It was actually difficult to lose because Sasuke's movements were so predictable that Naruto thought he could win while wearing a blindfold. It felt like Sasuke was moving in slow motion. When Naruto made eye contact with a bewildered and enraged 6-year-old Sasuke, he raised a sluggish arm to block a punch. Sasuke could tell that Naruto was holding back, and that infuriated him. This was the child who easily broke his arm. Why was he suddenly slow? After taking a few steps back, with his heel just a foot or two from the line, Naruto let a punch land in his chin. Everyone laughed when Naruto played the scared fool and fell out of the ring and landed on his butt, but Hinata was baffled as to why Naruto allowed himself to lose. Sasuke growled as he unleashed a series of punches and kicks. Sasuke Uchiha won. Iruka called out, sharing Hinata's curiosity. When Sasuke's fangirls praised his performance and insulted Naruto, saying the typical things and that he had cheated on them the last time they fought, they went crazy. Iruka gave the order, now make the harmony symbol. Feeling like a complete idiot but happy that he had protected Hinata, Naruto stood up and approached Sasuke, extending a hand with 2 fingers pointing out for him to shake, but Sasuke had other ideas. Sasuke slapped Naruto's hand away and said, "What are you having trouble with? How come you allowed me to win?" Feeling insulted, Sasuke roared. Naruto scowled but remained silent, and if he opened his mouth, a string of impressive curse words would spill out. "That's sufficient, Sasuke. Create the harmony symbol," Iruka said once more. When Sasuke extended his hand and interlocked his fingers, Naruto started to squeeze them as hard as he could. Sasuke gritted his teeth and started to squeeze back, promising to find out why Naruto was holding back. Final flashback: a light wind rustled their hair as the three faced each other in the clearing. Turning to Kiba, Sasuke said, "Mutt, stay out of my way. This fight is between me and him," he declared, enforcing it with a glare. As he put Akamaru down, Kiba sneered, as if, "Teme, I own you," he growled angrily in response. With a sigh, Naruto said, "Being this attractive is really difficult. It seems like all the attractive women and men are vying for me." He enraged them both with his dramatic statement. "Stop talking, moron. I'm not gay, Sasuke, however, tsked. I want to fight you one-on-one so I can prove that I'm stronger than you are, and so you can't use the excuse it was 2-on-1 when I crush you," he said bluntly. Kiba roared, readily allowing Naruto's words to affect him. "Oh," Naruto laughed. "Is it your intention to crush me? Since I let you win every fight we've had since we were kids, you seem to be forgetting that, don't you?" With a mocking tone, he asked. But it wasn't the kind of friendly mocking he used with Kiba. No, it was the kind of mocking you use on someone you hate, dripping with anger and full of contempt. "That was then," said Sasuke, grunting. Sasuke stated in a matter of fact manner, "I'm going to win because I train harder than you do, and that makes me stronger than you." "So you train harder than I do, said Naruto, laughing loudly. "I assumed that training would be beneath your noble lineage." He sneered at the word noble and mocked it. Sasuke narrowed his eyes and wanted to scold Naruto for disparaging his clan, but he decided to respond to his question by saying, "No." Prior to going crazy, Itachi was correct when he said that talent is not as important as hard work, and I put in more effort than anyone else to fulfill my goals. Sasuke responded, "That's why you won't lay a single scratch," but was interrupted by a burst of wind and a sudden movement. His shorts were identical except for a belt loop, and his shirt had a large cut from sleeve to sleeve. When Sasuke saw his now ruined clothes, his eyes widened. Kiba let out a few, "Holy shits," before Sasuke saw that he had a continuous shallow cut from shoulder to knee that only broke off from the belt loop. Perhaps this was what made it so frightening, even though the cut wasn't deep enough to draw more than a drop of blood. "I apologize. I was powerless to stop you from leaving yourself so exposed. You mentioned something about a scratch, right?" There was no teasing or mocking in Naruto's tone as he said, "I was just giving Sasuke a sneak peek at what he was in for." Though he was unaware that the wooden sword was made of a unique type of wood that could conduct chakra, which is how Naruto cut Sasuke's clothes. Sasuke looked up from his clothes to see Naruto holding a wooden sword that resembled a real katana without the guard. "I didn't even see him move, which is amazing," Shoji, who was obviously impressed by what Naruto had just accomplished, exclaimed. On the inside, Ino was practically drooling at the idea that her true love was naked and that only a thin piece of cloth stood between them. "He hurt Sasuke-kun," she said weakly. Sakura did not express her inner thoughts, but she did agree with her friend. Shino was also paying much more attention to the match, but Shikamaru remained silent. Kurenai thought in disbelief, "That speed. I blinked and I missed it. Speed alone doesn't make him Junin level, but the match hasn't even started yet." With a slight smile, Hinata expressed her happiness that everyone was impressed by Naruto's speed and that he was finally getting to face Sasuke, something he had wanted to do for years. She was eager to see how they would react when they realized what Naruto was truly capable of. "Damn. The kid's fast," Asuma thought. blinking a couple times before turning to face an angry Sasuke. "Would you like to change shorts before the match starts?" he asked. "Yours are hanging by a thread," and got a glare in return. He sighed and shouted, "Start," before leaping back a few yards. Sasuke immediately took off, determined to exact revenge on Naruto for destroying his clothes, but Naruto avoided every blow with a sly smile on his face. "Sasuke, is this all you have?" "I'm not impressed," Naruto sarcastically said, his smile growing as he saw how Sasuke was reacting to his remarks. Sasuke roared as his punches and kicks increased in intensity, determined to hit Naruto if it were his last act, but Naruto easily avoided all of them, waiting long enough for Sasuke to believe he had gotten him, but at the last second, he would move his body just enough to make Sasuke's attack miss. It was upsetting and humiliating. Sasuke simply grunted and then grinned. "Suga!" Kiba shouted as he transformed into a human drill and pointed at Naruto's back. To everyone's surprise, though, Naruto planted his feet and caught Kiba as the Kiba drill got closer. Naruto held on, his face showing no signs of pain, even though Kiba was spinning so quickly that it tore right through both his skin and his glove. Kurenai, who had done some research on Kiba because she wanted him on her original team, exclaimed in a breathless voice, "Holy shit." She was aware of how devastating his Suga was. A direct hit would shred your skin, while a glance would tear it. She was certain that she would be a mess after taking one of those, let alone stopping it with her bare hand, so her doubts about what Kakashi had said disappeared in an instant. With the possible exception of Hinata, who was aware of Naruto's strength, the genin were equally as awed by him as Kurenai. Both Shikamaru and Shino were re-evaluating Naruto. Shikamaru now believed that Naruto was much more problematic than he had been before, and Shino now believed that Naruto was even more of a mystery. Sakura and Ino both gaped openly. They had witnessed Kiba use it enough to know that it was extremely potent, but they were unaware of the details like Kurenai. Both Hinata and Kakashi were taken aback, Kakashi more than Hinata because she was aware of Naruto's recklessness in using his hand to halt the attack, but they also understood that the Hokage had granted him permission to stop holding back, so perhaps this was just him experimenting with his newfound freedom. Naruto looked down at his hand and was not too shocked to see bone in a few spots that had more contact with Kiba's quickly spinning head. "Damn. That stung more than I thought it would," he said as he threw Kiba away. Sasuke was dumbfounded by what he had just witnessed and simply stared at Naruto in disbelief. He was familiar with the sensation of that human drill because Kiba had previously used his Suga and Gatsuga on him during some of the later academy spars. That begged the question. How in the world did he just use one hand to stop it? Looking as shocked as Sasuke, Kiba landed a few feet away on his feet and exclaimed, "What the hell are you?" Even his mother couldn't throw away his Suga in that manner, so Kiba demanded. Instead of responding, Naruto concentrated his chakra on his injured hand, covering the exposed bone with muscle and skin as soon as possible. This was more akin to a Kekkei Genkai, where the more chakra he focused, the faster the healing, though there were limitations. Naruto's chakra control was far too weak for medical ninjutsu because he was unable to heal other people. "Kiba, don't get involved," Naruto said in a serious tone that nearly made Kiba shudder. "I'm crushing on Sasuke right now. I don't want my teammate to get hurt because you were in the way." Kiba was frightened by his eyes more than by his tone, though he wouldn't acknowledge it. They had no regrets. Naruto was serious when he declared that he would crush Sasuke. Kiba genuinely pondered what Sasuke had done to enrage Naruto. Naruto turned to face a recuperating Sasuke without waiting to see Kiba's response. "Teme. It's nothing personal." "Well, that's a complete lie. It's completely personal," Naruto said, lightly bouncing his mock sword against his shoulder. Naruto's tone was sickeningly sweet, like a predator deciding to play with its prey a little before devouring it whole. "Anyway, I hope you're ready to meet the rest of your clan," Naruto said. Sasuke flew in the direction Naruto sent him, too stunned to get his feet under him, and landed on his face nearly a dozen yards away after Naruto abruptly disappeared and then reappeared before delivering a devastating backhand to his jaw. Naruto walked idly over to Sasuke, who was getting back up, thinking, he should be glad that I held back with that slap. If he were a civilian, his neck would have broken. A civilian would be a bloody mess if thrown through a wall, but a shinobi would brush themselves off because they used chakra to strengthen their bones, muscles, tendons, and other medical components to an incredible degree. "You're done after just one slap." After stopping a few feet from Sasuke, whose face was already starting to swell where Naruto had struck him, Naruto asked. Sasuke, infuriated by the remark, delivered another blow, but Naruto's mock sword wielding hand flicked it away with a slight flick before stabbing him in the stomach. Even though it didn't pierce his skin, it was extremely painful. Sasuke, determined to get at least one clean blow on the blonde, smacked the wooden blade away and started raining blows on Naruto, but Naruto's weapon smacked away every punch and kick. Sasuke could already feel the bruises forming as his anger and embarrassment grew. He threw a left hook, but the blade struck his elbow. He jabbed, but the wooden sword snapped his wrist, and he kicked, but missed and took a blow to his kneecap. He trained for hours on end to exact revenge on his clan, but he was unable to even touch Naruto. He was certain that he trained more than the blonde, more than any genin, and more than most Junin, but he now realized that he was mistaken. Naruto was in a whole other league, and based on the sarcastic smile on his face, Sasuke assumed that this was not even close to his actual strength. "Are you lacking any additional strategies?" Naruto asked, skillfully dodging a blow before launching a barrage of blows at Sasuke's back and ribs. When he stopped attacking and moved away from him, Sasuke snarled and then flew through the hand signs for one of his family's signature jutsus. "Don't stop them," Kurenai said, looking back in surprise at Kakashi, who was shaking his head, as her eye widened and she attempted to stop Sasuke before things got out of control, but she was stopped by a hand on her shoulder. Kakashi stated, "Naruto in particular needs to get this out of his system." "He's attempting to murder Kakashi, your pupil," Kurenai explained in an absurd tone, perplexed as to why Kakashi wasn't joining in. Kakashi shook his head and said, "Just watch and don't interfere," in a languid voice. She relaxed slowly and returned her focus to the match. "Grand Fireball Jutsu, fire release," he yelled, his flames engulfing Naruto's position. Before canceling the jutsu to prevent exhaustion, Sasuke maintained the flames for an impressive 30 seconds. As he regained control of his breathing, he looked into the remaining smoke to see if he had Naruto. It was nearly a minute later when the smoke finally cleared, and to his surprise, Naruto was no longer there. He thought bewilderedly, that fireball wasn't even close to hot enough to turn him to ash. "Teme, what are you looking at?" Using Sasuke's shoulder as support, Naruto said. Sasuke immediately pulled out a kunai and attempted to slit Naruto, but Naruto grabbed his wrist before the blade could reach the halfway point. His words, "I think I've played with you enough, Uchiha scum," came as he squeezed and twisted Sasuke's wrist until it snapped loudly. Sasuke let out a cry of agony, but it was muffled by a knee to the stomach. Naruto grabbed his hair, releasing the fractured wrist, and gave him a hard yank. "Oh no, you don't, Sasuke." With his bokken on the ground, Naruto slammed his now empty fist into Sasuke's arms and body, saying, "I still have 7 years of bullshit I have to pay you back for." It was obvious that Naruto had won this match, so Kurenai went to stop it, but Kakashi stopped her again. He remarked, "Don't interfere," while observing Naruto defeat the final, loyal, Uchiha. "You can't be serious, Kakashi? Sasuke is being battered. We must intervene before he passes away," Kurenai insisted. "Kurenai. Nisan, Naruto.kun won't kill Sasuke," Hinata responded on behalf of her sensei. Feeling somewhat deceived that her younger sister had not supported her, Kurenai spun around to ask, "What do you mean? Do you not watch the game?" She pointed to the beating, which was now only one-sided, and asked rhetorically. She is implying that Naruto is merely engaging in play with the Teme. He would be if he wanted him dead, Kiba remarked as he took a seat. Raising an eyebrow, Kakashi asked, "Did you give up?" "It doesn't look like you," he said. Kiba sighed. "Naruto used my most powerful technique, but it had no effect whatsoever on him. I may occasionally be a bit slow, but I'm not a moron." He sighed. It looks like his plan to win Hinata over wouldn't work out. "If I had tried to continue fighting, Naruto would have put me out of commission so he could take on the Teme." "Naruto.kun won't kill Sasuke," Hinata said firmly, nodding. Just as Naruto was about to punch Sasuke so hard in the stomach that Sasuke's shirt tore off and he flew several feet away, Kurenai glanced anxiously over at him. No, after saying, "I'm sorry, but I can't in good conscience let this go on," she vanished in a shunshin. Kakashi exhaled. "I hope she knows that Naruto's not going to be the one upset." Apathetically, Naruto approached the battered and bruised Uchiha. "Enough of that, Naruto," Kurenai gave the order from behind Naruto. He glanced over his shoulder and saw the figure of Hinata's older sister staring at him. He raised an eyebrow, still holding on to the frayed remains of Sasuke's shirt, and was about to reply when Sasuke coughed up blood and barely turned over on his side. As he threw the ruined shirt on top of his defeated opponent, Naruto sighed and said, "I suppose you're correct. This wasn't even enjoyable," he said wearily as he started to leave. Even though he brutally defeated Sasuke, it wasn't retaliation, despite what some may say. It was revenge. Every cut, bruise, and broken bone that Naruto just inflicted on Sasuke was justified. In fact, he deserved much more, but Naruto couldn't bear it. A weak voice interrupted Naruto as he started to return to the others, passing Kurenai, who was giving him her best. You should feel terrible about what you just did expression. Saying, stop. I'm not done with you yet. Sasuke stumbled to his feet. Kurenai hurried to her student's side, and Naruto paused with a sigh. Sasuke, Kurenai started, stay down, you, and put a hand on Sasuke's shoulder to prevent him from getting up, but it was smacked off. Avoid touching me. I must demonstrate that the Uchiha. Naruto interrupted him by kicking him in the face. Cease your delusions. Stay down. You can't win. This isn't a film where you can win by willpower alone. I'll end you if you get back up and threaten Hinata or me once more. Sasuke, you are not unique. You are not a prodigy like your brother, and the odds against you killing him are extremely high. I am so tired of your conceit and haughtiness. It will take 1,000 years for you to be able to touch Itachi at the pace you're going. That's the reality. You know why you will never murder him? Naruto made a demand. Silence fell. Because you're too damned cocky and conceited to take assistance. You claim that because you train hard, you don't need anyone else, but you are so mistaken that you ought to win an award. You've already reached the limit of what you can accomplish on your own, Teme. Naruto concluded angrily, then sighed and tucked his hands in his pockets as his mock sword vanished in a puff of smoke. If you truly want to kill Itachi, and I imagine you do, admit that you can't do it on your own because the cold, hard truth is that you can't. If you continue as you are now, even if you do find Itachi, the only thing you'll be able to do is bleed on him, Naruto said. He declared, I'm done with this, and then he left for the town, Hinata trailing behind to check on him. Kurenai begged him to stay down, but Sasuke struggled to his feet, thinking about what Naruto had said. Ignoring everyone, he said, I'm going to the hospital, and started to limp toward Konoha's hospital. When Ino noticed this, she immediately tried to assist the fallen Uchiha, but he disregarded her. Soon all the genin had scattered, leaving only the Junin. As he read his favorite book, Kakashi questioned, so, still think I was lying? Kurenai let out a sigh. She said, no, but this turned into a mess, didn't it? And got 2 grunts in response. Kurenai's gaze suddenly shifted to Asuma. She insisted, why didn't you stop the match earlier? Which made Asuma sigh. There are 3 types of fights. Fights to protect a life, fights to take a life, and fights to protect your pride. The last one is the type you do not interfere with, he said as he lit up. Kurenai scowled in perplexity and motioned for Asuma to elaborate. Taking a long drag. Kurenai flinched when Naruto's stay with the Uchiha clan was brought up. Sasuke was fighting for his clan's pride and Naruto was fighting to regain lost pride with the Uchiha incident. Every time our favorite blonde was mentioned, she seemed to forget about it. I didn't want to jump in because not only would it be a major insult against their pride, but it's better that they deal with it now than when they're both high-ranking shinobi. Though Naruto was a bit stronger than I anticipated, he said with a sigh. After pausing, she turned to face Kakashi, who had begun to respond to her query before she had a chance to pose it. Yes, that's why I told you not to interfere. Naruto wouldn't kill Sasuke. Not even the Hokage would be able to protect Naruto from the shitstorm that would get kicked up if he murdered the last loyal Uchiha. They, more Naruto than Sasuke, needed to vent their anger. It seems Naruto got most of his out, but since the fight was so one-sided, Sasuke's anger may either fester or vanish with that little talk, Kakashi thought as he turned the page. Kurenai nodded and remarked, so it doesn't matter that I saved my student from additional pain. Kakashi said thoughtfully, not necessarily. You may have made Sasuke's anger fester because you thought he needed to be saved. So we may end up with a much more violent and antisocial Sasuke than we already have, before giving Kurenai clarification. I guess it's a guy thing. Kurenai lowered his shoulders. She fervently hoped Naruto's words would pierce Sasuke's thick skull. She was unsure of her ability to manage 2 students who were utterly antisocial. Kakashi smiled in her eyes. Let's hope for the best, shall we? In an attempt to slow his pounding heart, Naruto took a slow breath. As he moved, sweat trickled from his body and brow, adding to the pool at his feet. The puddle turned a reddish pink as the blood from the numerous wounds that covered his body mixed with his perspiration. Naruto was blindfolded, so he was unable to see this. He had plugs that blocked all sound, so he was unable to hear. He exhaled calmly, concentrating on his other senses, primarily his sense of touch, to compensate for his loss of sight and hearing. He felt it again after a few seconds, a faint rumble coming from a few feet to his left. He shifted his body just enough to avoid the projectile that came hurtling at him. He was able to get back to where he was before having to dodge 2 more in quick succession. He repeated this pattern for several minutes, feeling the faint vibrations before he had to dodge. He did a lot, but a lot of people also hit him. With a sigh of relief, Naruto tore off his earplugs and blindfold after feeling a sudden vibration on his wrist. He opened his eyes and flinched at the unexpected brightness. Aside from the blood stains, the room he was in was completely white and had about 100 circular holes spaced out at regular intervals. Naruto counted the stains that essentially covered his body as he looked down at his paint-covered body. There were 38 direct hits, 22 heavy marks, and minor scrapes remaining. Not bad for someone who had spent an hour and a half avoiding balls covered in paint. Naruto was honing his senses, including his reaction time. There were 100 balls in the room, each painted a different color so that he could see how badly he had been hit. If Naruto avoided them, they would return to their original hole, and if he didn't, well, that was obvious. The exercise would end when it ran out of rubber balls, which it would keep shooting. At the moment, Naruto's best time was 1 hour and 55 minutes. After removing his ruined training clothes and letting them fall to the ground, Naruto approached the door wearing a skin-tight silver shirt and spandex black shorts. Before leaving the room, he created a few clones to clean it up, all of them complaining as they went. As he plunged into darkness, he whistled a little tune. About 2 years ago, he discovered the hidden base. There were rooms for everything he needed in the vast network of subterranean tunnels. He left most of the rooms as they were originally owned, but he had to modify a few for training purposes. Orochimaru. The base, which Naruto claimed was the one he had stayed in right before leaving Konoha, was one of his numerous underground hideouts that he had dispersed throughout the elemental nations. Naruto remolded a number of rooms, as previously stated, mostly those not used for dreadful experiments. He either left the others alone or sealed them off. They practiced a wide range of skills in the training rooms he remodeled, including the one he was in just now. He created a library with enough books to compete with Konoha's library, and while the kitchen was well equipped, he was currently short on food because of his voracious appetite and his inability to afford food. He used a variety of methods to collect books for his own library. He would steal from some, and if he ever had a job, he would look for any good books, whether or not they had anything to do with ninjas. He also copied others from the library in Konoha. He has been sending clones to copy books and scrolls for the past 2 years. Occasionally, when the sky grew dark, he would sneak in and copy a few jutsus from the higher-ranked sections. But he did not enter the science room. Although Naruto's decision to leave the miserable place undamaged may present a moral dilemma, he did so and frequently used it for experiments. Despite his illness, Orochimaru was a highly skilled scientist with well-equipped labs. Naruto left the science room in its current state and used it in a variety of ways, not knowing where he could even purchase half of the items there. Naruto concentrated on assisting shinobi in their day-to-day activities, while Orochimaru would experiment on humans in an attempt to obtain immortality and bloodlines. He created ration bars that provided enough nutrition for a day and food pills without the terrible side effects. In addition to many other helpful items for their line of work, he created medications that would keep you awake. He was still testing their long-term effects and the impact of continued use, so none of them were on the open market at the time. But he would pitch those things to Gigi after they were thoroughly tested. However, there was another explanation for his hesitation. The elderly Hokage would question how and where he produced these miraculous drugs. The trail might have led to this place when he pitched them. Naruto had spent the previous year in complete isolation here. Only Hinata and possibly Gigi were aware of the location where he trained and honed his skills. It had been cleaned of the chemicals and bodies that Orochimaru had used when he discovered it. Naruto was certain that the old Hokage was aware of it but lacked the manpower to stop it. Naruto came to the conclusion that Gigi had placed the base at the bottom of his list due to the Kyuubi attack, which destroyed a third of their forces, and Orochimaru's defection, which cost Konoha one of their strongest and several of his pawns. He just boarded it off and appeared to have forgotten about it because he lacked the manpower and time to hold the place. Naruto had discovered the location by accident. Hinata was walking through the woods when he saw the genjutsu because he had a sparring match to attend. He initially believed that his eyes were just deceiving him, but he was able to dispel the genjutsu after experiencing a significant chakra surge. The smell of stale air and decay had met him as he entered the long, sealed-off hideout. 11-year-old Naruto made the decision to take ownership of the base after investigating it. Through trial and error, he fixed up many of the rooms he intended to use and cleaned everything with the aid of numerous shadow clones. One room in particular was the reason the task had taken so long, many months, nearly a year. Naruto was going to go into that room. When Naruto came to a dead end, he turned to face the door that stood in his way. This one, in contrast to the others that lined the dimly lit corridors, was a massive double door constructed of the strongest oak wood. It looked like a gateway to another realm because of the hundreds of elaborate seals on its surface. But if a seal master looked at them, he could see that was not the purpose of the seals. They were intended to contain something. Before wiping some blood in a tiny circle above the handle, Naruto bit his thumb. The door opened as Naruto's blood rested for a moment before the seal activated and began to glow a menacing blue before being absorbed into it. The doors swung open, and light grew from the crevice between them. The doors shut behind Naruto as he entered the light. As the doors clicked behind him, Naruto winced once more at the room's bright lighting and mentally noted that he would take action later. He looked around the room as his eyes grew accustomed to the bright lighting. As previously stated, the space was extremely light. Rather than coming from a single source, the light appeared to be poured from the walls. In addition to being enormous, the room featured a 4-story, tall dome ceiling. But hundreds of thousands of intricate seals lapped over one another on the dome, reducing the brightness of the room. There were seals that prevented chakra from being felt outside the room, seals that blocked all sound from the room, chakra suppression seals, reinforcing seals, contaminate seals, regeneration seals, anti-damaging seals, and so on. Having spent roughly 9 months creating this room, Naruto was quite proud of it. The thousands of clones that collaborated with him were included in that. You could release the Kyuubi in this room and no one outside would ever know because it was so secure and isolated. That, ironically, had been the room's function. Naruto gazed down at his own creation, which had taken more than a month to make, in the middle of the room. He used the Kyuubi's evil chakra to create a shadow clone, initially with no clear intention. All he wanted to do was wait and see. He used the clone for training after realizing that it was very different from its cousins. The clone looked sickly because of his grayish-white skin. It had Kyuubi's red eyes and blonde hair that darkened to black at the tips, which Naruto thought was cool. Naruto thought it was awesome that he had a tail, but it was more akin to a lizard's than a fox's. The clone's personality was lacking in many ways. The typical clones of Naruto were nearly identical to him in every way: face, height, and personality. That was because he created them with his chakra. But the clone was twisted when he used Kyuubi's chakra. It demanded destruction, power, and bloodshed. For this reason, Naruto had it pinned in the middle of the room with dozens of chains that were enforced by chakra and sealed with suppression seals. Naruto asked the named clone, "Yo, Mema, you up for a spar?" As the clone raised its head and gave Naruto's smiling face a low, menacing growl. Mema had his own personality, so he gave him a name, even though Naruto felt he could get away with referring to his clones by their true names. His eyes narrowed resolutely, and Mema nodded sharply. Naruto put a hand on Mema's seal on his stomach and started to pump Kurama's chakra into him while maintaining the same arrogant smile. For several reasons, Kurama had consented to this training approach. First of all, if Naruto made a mistake, it was an opportunity to get out of his seal. Second, Naruto became more powerful. Kurama didn't want Naruto to die, but he was still a long way from considering him a friend. Since his father thousands of years ago, Naruto had shown him the utmost kindness. Although he still yearned for his freedom, he did not want Naruto to perish in order to obtain it. However, Kurama would seize the opportunity if it came up, even if it meant Naruto's death, if there was no other choice. "How about we kick this up a notch, Mema? 3 tails is getting pretty boring," Naruto said, drawing more of Kurama's chakra than usual. Mema returned the smile, but it was one that was laced with hate and malice. Naruto's smile grew wider. Kakashi read his favorite book while humming to himself. He was en route to a cafe where he was required to meet Kurenai and Asuma. To discuss the progress of their teams, they had agreed to get together once a week, if missions permitted. When Asuma presented the idea to them, he did so with that justification. Asuma only wanted some time to win Kurenai over. He had to use devious tactics because she kept shoving him down for drinks. Kakashi had that much time to speak with Kurenai without interruption because he was always at least 2 hours late for anything that wasn't required. Naturally, Kakashi made the decision that he would only be late by roughly half an hour. He needed to entertain himself in some way, and if it meant interfering with Asuma's romantic life, that's what it would be. The small bell on the handle of the cafe jingled as Kakashi entered through the front door. Asuma looked up from where he was standing at the sound, and Kakashi could almost see his hopes dwindling. Kakashi gave himself a mental pat on the back for a job well done, thinking, "Fufu, seems like he was making a bit of progress with Kurenai." He slid into the seat beside Asuma and said, "Yo," in a casual manner. Before they started working, the two Junin exchanged greetings. Kurenai began by saying, "So, I heard your team finally got the required amount of D-ranked missions," addressing Kakashi. As he turned the page, he nodded. "Yep, they finished them off a couple of days ago. I'm just looking for a suitable C-ranked mission to get their feet wet," Kakashi commented, grinning at Kurenai. When Kakashi said, "suitable mission," Kurenai and Asuma nodded in agreement, indicating that he was searching for one so the genin could get their first kill. Kakashi was therefore searching for a mission that had little chance of anything higher but a high risk of bandits. Kurenai drew her eyebrows together in concern and said, "I know you're there, sensei, but it hasn't even been a month, isn't it a little soon? A genin's career could end right there if they were unable to handle their first kill and it came too soon." For the first kill, the majority of Junin senseis typically waited 4 to 6 months. In response to Kurenai's worries, Kakashi nodded and said, "Maybe, but they're tough. The only one I have any concerns about is Hinata, so I'll be sure to notify you when it happens," while grinning at Kurenai once more. After giving Asuma a thank you nod, Kurenai inquired about any updates regarding his team. "There have. Ino asked me to start training the team seriously, and from what Inoichi told me, she's learning more clan techniques as well. I guess being defeated by Sakura really got to her," Asuma said while drinking his coffee. "And your other two?" asked Kurenai. Asuma appeared to be contemplating it. Shikamaru still seems as unmotivated as ever, but Choji seems to be less inclined to hold back. Though, once he thinks he's going to hurt Ino or Shikamaru, he tries to stop himself, he said. Choji stopped too soon, even though it was a good trade to stop if you thought you were going to hurt a friend. In order to maximize the training's impact on your partner, you should ideally stop at the last minute. But Choji halted almost 10 seconds ahead of schedule, allowing Shikamaru and Ino ample time to strike back. Kurenai drank her tea and nodded. Everybody else's teams appeared to be making headway. With a perverse giggle, Kakashi turned his page and inquired, "How are your cute genin?" She sighed deeply in disappointment after pounding down the tick mark that threatened to devour her head. Asuma inferred, "I assume that things aren't going well," while encouraging her to go on. Sakura's progressing excellently, while she's still far behind in the physical aspects of being a shinobi. Her progress in genjutsu is impressive. She even started to dabble in medical ninjutsu after she saw Hinata. "I'm not sure how much progress she's made, but by judging from the smile I get every time I ask, I'd say she's coming close to mastering the basics," Kurenai said with a great deal of confidence in her tone. And she had good reason to be. Few could claim to have transformed a troubled kid into a young shinobi with a promising future. Recalling what Kurenai had told him about what she had done to straighten Sakura, Asuma coughed into his hand while his cheeks flushed. Kurenai noticed Asuma's embarrassment and smiled a little before continuing, saying, "Shino is progressing steadily. His tracking skills are progressing, but he seems more focused on increasing the size of his hive as well as his variety of insects. He's still as stoic as ever, but he made a joke the other day, well, more of a dry wit comment, but it's progress. So I'm guessing that long sigh in the beginning was because of Sasuke?" Kakashi guessed. "So I'm guessing that Naruto's words didn't get through to him?" Asuma asked after Kurenai nodded. When Kurenai noticed the bewilderment in Asuma and Kakashi's eyes, she quickly continued after taking a sip of her tea. "They did. Well, they sorta did," she said, adding that, "He's had some pretty big mood swings lately. Sometimes it's like he wants to participate in the group. Like asking Sakura how she's progressing in genjutsu or asking Shino about his bugs. But," added Asuma, "but at other times, he's even more anti-social than he was. He snaps at anyone that comes close to him, and making conversation is impossible. It's completely destroying any teamwork between him and his teammates," sighed Kurenai. Holding her head up with her hands, she confessed, "I really don't know what to do." She knew better than to ask for help, even though she felt a little embarrassed that she couldn't manage her own genin. Kakashi hummed as though he knew exactly what to do. Kurenai gave him a hopeful look, but that vanished as soon as Kakashi smiled at her and said, "I've got nothing." "You really got a tough break, even more so when it's your first genin team," he said in an apologetic tone as her gaze shifted to Asuma, who shrugged. Kurenai let out another sigh as she drank her tea. She was disappointed even though she hadn't had high expectations. After whispering, "Maybe I'll take him to the Yamanakas for an evaluation sometime," she looked back up at Kakashi and inquired, "How's Naruto been since the fight?" She was wondering if he was also acting out. As he turned the page, Kakashi responded, "Naruto was a little out of it a few days after the match, but Hinata and I spoke to him, he's fine now." Naruto wasn't feeling well. In actuality, he was doing the exact opposite of fine. His body was covered in wounds, his left arm was rendered useless by a massive 4-claw gash, his hair was drenched in blood, and every part of his body hurt. Naruto could almost feel Mema's insane smile as he scowled at the four-tailed clone in front of him. Naruto would acknowledge that he wasn't prepared for 4 tails if he were being truthful with himself. Perhaps a little stronger than 3 tails, he had managed to keep up. But the power boost from the 4th tail was so much greater than he had anticipated. He had been perplexed when Mema's skin started to peel off, but he persisted at Mema's request. When Naruto's evil clone was encased in a black ball, he had to leap back. Naruto made the half-ram sign, which would put an end to the spar, and spat out a mouthful of blood along with a molar. He simply wasn't prepared until he was able to defeat 3 tails completely. But Mema had other plans. Bubbles of chakra started to emerge from his body as he threw back his head. Naruto hesitated for a second, wondering what Mema was up to. This was unlike anything he had ever seen. What on earth is this? As he observed the chakra start to focus above Mema's mouth and transform into a menacing-looking ball, he thought. Every shinobi instinct in Naruto told him that the strange jutsu was bad news, so he took a step back. When Mema swallowed it, he took another, and another when he became comically bloated. Naruto used the chakra suppression seals when the blast came out of Mema's mouth. Mema was encircled by chains that sucked the foul chakra, steaming from contact. As the seals on the walls started to drain the Bijudama's power, they glowed white. Now Naruto knew what it was. But it was too late, he had set the seals. The mass of chakra was still hurtling toward him with frightful power and speed. Oshish. T. Just before the chakra bomb wiped him off the planet, Naruto was able to think as he raised his arm and a Rasengan sprang into being. With a sigh, Kiba entered his kitchen and picked up a bowl. Kiba was completely bored. Since yesterday, he and Akamaru had no missions. They were off today since Kakashi-sensei stated that he was searching for a fierce one for them. He poured himself a bowl of cereal and took it out of the cabinet his sister had hidden it in. If Hana ever found out, she would kill him, but she had a mission for the following week, and she wouldn't remember how much was left by then. When he heard a faint whine, he glanced down and picked up another bowl for his companion. As he ate the cereal slowly, he let out a loud sigh and acknowledged that it tasted far better than rice. He was thinking deeply about his team. He acknowledged, "I'm not as strong as them." He knew it was true, even though it was a serious insult to his pride. For Kiba, not being the strong one was a novel idea. He had always been among the strongest since the academy. He did struggle academically, but he consistently placed in the top 2 for physical attributes. Most of the time, Sasuke was the one who maintained the top position. Kiba concluded that he didn't like it. Being the person his team had to watch out for bothered him. He had always been the weakest link in all the simulated missions. In terms of strength, ninjutsu, genjutsu, taijutsu, speed, and strategy, Naruto outperformed him. In terms of strategy, tracking, accuracy, dodging, and medical matters, Hinata-chan outperformed him. There was nothing he could offer. His tracking abilities and taijutsu were his only strong points, and both Naruto and Hinata-chan outperformed him in these areas. As he stroked Akamaru's head, Kiba let out another sigh. "What are we going to do, buddy?" he asked himself, but his mother responded. As she came into the kitchen, Sume grinned ferociously and asked, "Get beaten to a pulp by your sister?" She was shocked to learn that she wasn't met with an angry accusation that he could beat his sister on any day of the week. She glanced back to see Kiba playing with the leftover cereal while he leaned on the table. For a brief moment, Sume's eyes widened. Kiba never felt sad or gave anything more than 5 seconds of thought. Then she realized what Kiba was contemplating. So it happened at last. As Sume picked up a glass and filled it with water, she thought, "Little Kiba." Chan finally realized that he's not the biggest fish in the sea. Since most Inuzukas experience this, she had been wondering when it would occur. Sume would be the first to acknowledge the haughtiness of her clan. It was a hot-headed, stubborn arrogance, not the same as that of the Uchiha and Hyuga. Thus, the majority of Inuzukas came to the profound realization that the world is much larger than they initially believed. The people who didn't died. As he placed his bowl of milk on the floor for Akamaru, Kiba said softly, "Hey, Mom, am I weak?" After humming, Sume remarked, "Well, you're strong for a genin, but in the grand scheme of things, yeah, you're pretty weak." "Naruto and Hinata are genin," Kiba muttered as he slumped onto the table, apparently unimpressed by her response. Sume made a ah-ching sound and then smiled. "So that's what brought this about," she said, sitting across from Kiba. Kiba muttered angrily, "They're just so much stronger than me. I'm just weighing the team down at this point," before he froze when an idea struck him. With unexpected zeal, he said, "Mom, could you train me?" His mother appeared to consider it, taking her time answering at Kiba's expense. "Why should I?" she asked, grinning ferociously. After going pale, Kiba sighed reluctantly and said, "I'll clean the kennels for a week," with considerably less zeal. "A month," retorted Kiba's mother. "No way. I'm not going to clean the stupid kennels for a month," Kiba protested, his mouth dropping. Sume said plainly, "Then I'm not going to train you," as she drained her water and proceeded to place it in the sink, allowing Kiba time to consider her offer. "Fine," she muttered as Kiba's head slammed the table, and she smiled. Gazing down at the remnants of his arm, Naruto gritted his teeth in agony. He was missing 3 fingers, his skin was ripped to pieces, and he was certain that at least 4 of his fingers were broken. "How's your arm?" he asked with a snarky smile. "I hope it hurts." Menma's crazed laughter cut short his diagnosis. "Menma, you know I've had way worse than this," Naruto said with a sneer that concealed the pain he was feeling. Steam rose from the claw marks on his shoulder. Before concentrating on his many other wounds, he needed both arms to work. A satisfied expression crossed Menma's face as he laughed. "Yeah, I know. Those memories are the only thing that keep me entertained in between spars," he said. His arm hurt, and he enjoyed the fact that Naruto had caused him pain, so he knew he was lying. As he tested his left arm, Naruto TSKED. It worked, but hardly. The bones were beginning to regrow or mend, but the flesh wounds remained. Naruto began to head for the exit, his stomach growling dangerously. "You know, I'm not sure why I let you keep your ability to talk. All you ever talk about is how you don't like me. I already more or less know what you're going to say before you even say it," he muttered. As Naruto simply waved goodbye without turning around, Menma yelled, "Don't leave me as though you won this battle, Uzumaki. This was my victory and it will be the first of many. One day soon I will take the power away from you and you will be the one in this room." The door closed behind Naruto as he walked back through it. Naruto hissed, "That fucking hurts," and grabbed his arm, urging the wounds to heal more quickly, but they were only crawling. This occurred as a result of Naruto's body running out of resources to repair his injuries. To fix Naruto's body, Kurama needed protein, calcium, potassium, liquids, and other materials. He couldn't make anything out of nothing. Naruto's body was gradually depleting its natural reserves as a result of his difficulties eating a full meal. In the hopes that there would be food in the kitchen, Naruto released his arm and made his way there. The boss's training regimen was so intense that Konohamaru was gasping for air. Never in his life had he been so exhausted, his muscles burned and his body ached from exhaustion. But he refused to give up, no matter how much his young body begged, unless Hanabi did it first. Konohamaru was in worse shape than Hanabi. Her pride as a Hyuga was the only thing keeping her going after her body had long since reached its limit. She had been strictly adhering to their sensei's instructions, as had her training partner. On the majority of the days he would supervise them, they had nearly reached the halfway point of the training scroll. For roughly 5 hours, she and Konohamaru had been running around the village, neither of them willing to stop. The children were followed by their Anbu guards, who were amazed and amused that they were still moving. Even though the children had just begun attending the academy, they were already putting in more effort than most of their peers. Because Kat recalled the times when Naruto was the one running around the village, they felt respect for both Naruto and the kids. As she watched the kids quarrel, she thought, he found 2 brats who are just as stubborn as he is. Kami, help the world if he ever gets a genin team. During his struggle for the lead, Konohamaru exclaimed, "Pant pant, you should. Pant. Give up, loser." Before Hanabi accelerated to regain the lead, he was able to pass her by a few seconds. As if, "Pant, monkey boy, you're pant pant. The one that should give up," she cried, frantically pumping her legs to pull Konohamaru farther away. Konohamaru pushed himself harder and grunted in effort. He had promised to win right from the start. If he couldn't even defeat a girl, he couldn't become Hokage. As they got closer to the finish line, a fallen oak tree, the 2 kids were tied for first place. With every step, they both exerted more effort in an attempt to outpace one another. Their breaths were ragged and short, and their feet thudded muffledly against the ground. At precisely the same moment, both crossed the finish line. As he staggered to a halt, Konohamaru exclaimed, "Ha, I, pant pant, beat you." Hanabi didn't agree. "Liar, pant pant, I won and, pant, you know it." Though he was secretly hoping that whatever Kami was listening would allow Hanabi to decline the challenge, he boasted, "Oh yeah. How about another lap, pant, around the village to prove who's, pant, the real winner here?" As she gasped for air, Hanabi glared at the boy. She started to reply, telling the monkey boy that he was on. But Kat knocked her out before she could finish her sentence. She gave Konohamaru a similar quick blow to the back of the neck. Kat did it for their own benefit even though she knew it was probably a very bad idea to eliminate a clan heir, much less two of them. These two would have continued until they passed away or collapsed, as she had witnessed with Naruto in the past. As he picked up Hanabi and vanished with a shunshin, she turned to face Lizard, who nodded. It was for the best. They didn't know when to quit, he said. While Kat was Konohamaru's guard, he was Hanabi's. With a sigh, Kat picked up the boy and disappeared with a shunshin. Naruto entered the kitchen, his face a mask of indifference to the agony he was experiencing. Even though it hurt more than a little, he had gone through much worse as a kid. The kitchen was not as bright as the other rooms. The room was filled with soft light from the fluorescent bulbs hanging overhead. Naruto hurried to the refrigerator, hoping it would be bursting with food, but when he opened the doors, he was let down. Not even a crumb or a morsel remained. They were empty. Naruto let out a disappointed sigh, but he hadn't been shocked. He had cleaned out the refrigerator a week ago, if my memory serves me correctly. He closed the doors and proceeded to the pantries, opening them similarly to how he had done with the refrigerator. He was disappointed because there was no food, just like in the refrigerator. With his arm pulsing in agony and his stomach growling in agreement, Naruto moaned as he pounded his head against the now closed doors. As he approached the cabinets, he muttered to himself, "Why is there never any food? Why did I promise Hinata-chan that I won't steal anymore?" He asked himself. They were his last hope because he couldn't recall ever going through them. He rummaged through the cabinets. The last one contained a box, but the others were empty except for dust bunnies. Naruto picked up the box with shaking hands, blew off the dust, and opened it. There were nutrition bars, one of Naruto's own inventions. But Naruto saw the G1 written in his own handwriting on top. This was the first generation of nutrition bars, as indicated by the G1. He was now working on the G6. As he picked up one of the bars, which was wrapped in a wrapper, Naruto inhaled deeply and exhaled deeply. He kept working on the nutrition bars because he wanted to improve their taste, not because they were effective. In fact, they were complete in that regard. In all honesty, Naruto would prefer to eat dirt than the most recent generation. He braced himself, cut open the wrapper with a small amount of wind chakra that had been sharpened, and took a huge bite. "It's gross," he whispered as he finished the first bar, his wounds already beginning to heal more quickly, fighting the urge to spit the disgusting tasting object out of his mouth and forcing himself to chew before swallowing. He reached for another and whispered, "It's so gross," once more. Just outside the Hokage's door, Kat shunshined. Before being granted permission to enter, she knocked twice. When Hiruzen saw his grandson being carried beneath the arm of one of his most trusted Anbu, his eyes drew together in concern. However, he quickly relaxed upon observing Kat's posture. Even if he were hurt, she would take him to the hospital before him because she was too calm for him to be hurt. The old Hokage smiled as Kat placed the boy on the couch and said, "I take it my grandson has been training rather hard." When Kat told the Hokage, he and the Hyuga heir, "I had to knock them out or they would have pushed themselves to collapsing or death," the Hokage laughed. "Naruto's influence I take it?" inquired the Hokage. As she stood over Konohamaru, Kat nodded and said, "Hi, Hokage. Sama. I haven't seen anyone this determined since him. He seems to have a knack for bringing out people's rivalries and motivations." The old man laughed at that. "Yes, he does seem rather talented in teaching," he muttered, turning to face Kat. "How did he do?" he asked. "Incredibly well considering he's in the academy." Due to the rivalry between he and the Hyuga heir, neither took a break nor complained and pushed themselves harder. They made admirable progress because of this. "I estimate that both he and the Hyuga heir will be eligible for early graduation by the end of the year," Kat stated. Hiruzen's eyebrows shot up. That was unexpected. Given that he had only been in the academy for a year, Konohamaru owed Naruto a debt of gratitude if he was already approaching genin level. Though, he does slack off when it comes to academics. He claims he won't need them when he's Hokage, Kat continued. After all, what child enjoyed studying? Hiruzen nodded. He opened his mouth to reply, but a low moan cut him off. Konohamaru, whose body was still hurting from his workout, rubbed his eyes and moaned. His grandfather was grinning down at him as he glanced around. Kat was nowhere to be found. "Welcome to the world of the living Kono-chan," Hiruzen replied. "I hope you enjoyed your nap." "How did I get here? I just beat the weirdo in a race," Konohamaru cried in rage, blinking once and then twice before leaping to his feet. If she wasn't present, how was he supposed to rub his victory in her face? "With ease," Hiruzen replied. "You collapsed from exhaustion and my Anbu brought you here, for his own good." The boy didn't need to be aware that he had been knocked out. Slowly nodding, Konohamaru's gaze shifted to the clock, and when it did, his mouth fell open. "It's 7 o'clock," he exclaimed, leaping from the couch. Is there something special about the time? The Hokage asked, looking down at him with curiosity and laughter. With pride, Konohamaru nodded and said, yeah, it's time for Kenjutsu training. Boss said that if I manage to get to the halfway point of the exercises then I can start learning. The halfway mark. Cat told me that he almost pushed himself to collapsing, he thought, somewhat surprised. Just what are you having my grandson doing, Naruto-kun? Silently, Hiruzen inquired. Suddenly, Konohamaru's expression darkened. But I don't want to learn Kenjutsu. Well I do but not as badly as Bojutsu. He exclaimed, his eyes fierce. With a humorous smile, Hiruzen said, Bojutsu, Yeah. Boss made me read books and some of them were about you. You totally kicked butt in the wars with your staff. Please teach me Chan. Konohamaru pleaded. He was deeply saddened that he was unable to teach his grandson his specialty. That I did grandson but, Hiruzen said, looking somewhat disappointed, I don't have time to teach you. I have my duties as Hokage to attend to, he said. What about the shadow clones boss uses? He uses them to do the things he doesn't want to do, Konohamaru said innocently, tilting his head to the left. Hiruzen hesitated as his entire world began to fall apart. Shadow clones, he said again, as though the term were unfamiliar. His mouth opened to speak, but the words would not come. Shadow clones, he said once more before everything finally clicked. Then something came back to him, a far-off memory that the sands of time had nearly erased. As he walked into the Hokage's office, which would soon be his, he discovered the Nidaime smiling broadly. He was taken aback by this since Hiruzen had never seen the Nidaime smile, much less a full-fledged one, and he was quite reserved. Sensei? He had inquired doubtfully. When the Nidaime first saw his pupil, he quickly suppressed his smile. Ah, Hiruzen, I didn't notice you there, he said stoically. No matter how relaxed or safe, Hiruzen tensed because his sensei was constantly on guard. This man was either a very bad spy or, for some reason, the Nidaime was very happy. Sensei, what was all that about? Why were you smiling? He inquired. His lips twitched. I've created a new jutsu called the Shadow Clone Jutsu. It's a solid construct of chakra that transfers all memories and experiences to the user. Though, it is a very high-cost technique. The user must evenly split his chakra with the clone. So it will be difficult to use in mass numbers, he clarified. That's amazing sensei. What is it used for? Hiruzen said, his eyes widening. Rakan, the Nidaime muttered after he paused. Sensei, you deceived me. So many things would have been different if Hiruzen had known the true purpose of the shadow clone technique, he thought indignantly. He wouldn't have to spend an absurd amount of time each day cooped up in this stuffy room. He could resume his exercises and go for walks in the village. The boy took a trembling step back as Hiruzen glanced down at Konohamaru. He was uneasy with the expression in Gigi's eyes. The boy's back suddenly popped as the old man gave him a firm embrace. As he held Konohamaru closer, the elderly Hokage exclaimed, Oh, Konohamaru. You're the best grandson a man could ask for. Gigi. Let me go. I can't breathe, Konohamaru cried as the boy gasped for air and struggled to escape the old man's unbelievably tight hold. Hiruzen, however, was unable to hear him and simply tightened his grip. Sitting in her Zen garden, Hinata hummed to herself. It was a small area isolated from the Hyuga compound as a whole. It belonged to her mother at first, but Hinata took care of it after she passed away. Now it was her joy and pride. A small pond with koi fish living in it was reached by a small waterfall. She used her pointer to draw shapes in the fine white sand. Herbs and flowers of every kind were growing. Last but not least was her bench, which Naruto had covered with seals to make it so cozy that she didn't want to get up. She drank her tea and sighed with satisfaction as she saw the bamboo stalks fill with water, then topple over and spill their contents into the pond. It was one of her few days off. She had the day to herself because she had no missions, training, or spars scheduled. Naruto responded that he already had a date with Menma planned when she asked him to spend the day with her. When Hinata considered the twisted clone, she suppressed a slight shudder. The fact that he, as Naruto insisted, could resemble his creator so much while still being ruthless and pure evil was terrifying. She trusted Naruto and his seals, even though she knew he was playing a risky game when he sparred with Menma. Naruto would not leave if he had stated that Menma would not. No, I'm going to enjoy my off day, Hinata said, shaking the thoughts of Menma from her mind. I'm determined not to let anything ruin it, she thought. Given how hectic a shinobi's life was, she had no idea when she would have another day off like this. But a whirl of leaves appeared in her garden, as if to disprove what she had said. As they dispersed, Hinata noticed Lizard, Hanabi's guard, holding Hanabi in his arms. Hinata stood up abruptly and demanded to know how her sister was doing. "She's fine. She pushed herself until she collapsed. I don't think she'll be waking up anytime soon," Lizard said, nodding as he handed Hanabi to Hinata to carry. Usually, he would approach the clan head directly or through the entrance, but Hinata had demanded that he come to her if it had to do with her training. As she took Hanabi, Hinata nodded. Lizard vanished with another whirl of leaves as soon as Hanabi was in her arms. With a smile on her face, Hinata said, "You worked yourself really hard. I'm proud of you, Hanabi." Before returning to her bench, she usually took Hanabi to her bed, but her bench was superior to opulent beds in many respects. Hanabi was placed on her lap with her head resting on it by Hinata. Hinata exposed more of Hanabi's pale face by tucking her sleek hair behind her ear. Before she snored gently, the sleeping girl muttered something about a monkey boy. With a warm smile, Hinata recalled the kind of relationship she and Hanabi might have if it weren't for their father. She liked to think of them as the kind of sisters who talked about everything and nothing. She wanted to have the same bond with her only blood sister as she did with Kurenai. As she started humming once more, she thought, today really couldn't be any better. Gazing at the tiny screen, Naruto smiled. After getting as well as he could, he had come over to accept Hinata's invitation to hang out, but he had changed his mind upon seeing the two sisters. Heading home to change the bandages on his arm, Naruto tucked his hands into his pockets and leaned off the wall he was hiding behind. He believed it wouldn't cause any issues, even though he hadn't been able to completely heal the skin and some of the muscle damage. But Naruto didn't realize how wrong he was. Hinata was headed to the special training ground she and Naruto had been using after leaving the clan compound. Perhaps, special, was a bit of an exaggeration, but it was special because Naruto found his chakra arms on the training grounds. They were essentially killing time until they had to go to a mission meeting after lunch, so they had decided to get together and practice a little. She saw the blonde in question approaching her as she made her way to the location. As she hurried to meet him, she gave him a small smile. He had on a long-sleeved shirt, but she noticed something a little off. Even though Naruto saw her and winced as she got closer, he continued to move, bracing himself for the reprimand he knew he would get. Hinata gave him a wary glance. "Why are you wearing long sleeves?" Naruto lied with ease, saying, "It just felt like a wardrobe change," but Hinata knew he was lying as usual. Narrowing her eyes in shock, Hinata approached him, took hold of his arm, and rolled up the sleeve to reveal his bandaged and injured arm. What happened?" she cried out, startled. She had never witnessed Naruto sustain an injury that persisted for more than a few hours. Naruto sighed in registration and withdrew his arm. He knew he would have to tell Hinata, but he didn't want to. Hinata opposed Menma's existence altogether, and she would pay the price in hell after learning of the ass-kicking he had given him. His explanation was vague. "I bit off more than I could chew with Menma," he said. Hinata's eyes narrowed. Naruto explained in a casual manner, but there was a hint of shame in his voice. "I thought I could handle 4 tails since I've been beating 3 every time. Turns out the 4 tail causes some weird reaction because the next thing I know Menma looks like a black and red human fox thing and he's wiping the floor with me." He had an almost exaggerated sense of his strength after years of mastering almost anything in a matter of months. Although he wasn't as conceited as the bloody Uchiha, he had started to believe he was more important than he truly was. He was, therefore, somewhat appreciative of Menma reminding him that he was not unbeatable. "I told you I didn't like you training with that thing. How long do you think it will take to heal?" Hinata asked, scowling first in exasperation and then with worry. Naruto breathed a sigh of relief. "I can't say for sure. I'm entirely out of food and until I'm able to get more nutrients in me it won't heal. It will heal, it just can't do it without the needed materials. You shouldn't steal it. Although, you could come over to the clan compound. I'm sure it wouldn't be a problem to feed you," Hinata said, smiling slightly as she gave Naruto a sad look. She was unable to recall the last time Naruto visited the compound. With visions of a feast racing through his head, Naruto's eyes glowed brightly. "Really? Sweet," he smiled. After saying that, they headed in a different direction to Hinata's house. The entire training process had actually been a front so they could hang out. In any case, that was their plan. But along the way, they encountered someone they both knew well and disliked more than the other. He was a teenager in the robes of a nobleman, a little older than Naruto and Hinata, with dark green eyes and short black hair. In addition, he was unusually attractive for his age. This was Akira, a member of the innermost circle of the feudal lord and the son of Byakuya. And a profound jackass, Naruto thought. Because he had gone on a date with Hinata, and not necessarily because she asked him to. Akira had already met the two. In addition to giving the Hyuga clan access to the inner court of the feudal lord and many other benefits, Hiyashi had determined that Akira would make a suitable candidate for Hinata to date and potentially marry. Naturally, Hiyashi had determined that Hinata and Akira should go on a few dates in order to gauge this idea. Even though Hinata disliked the concept, she reluctantly agreed to it since she understood its ramifications. Hiyashi was much more irate when he learned that Hinata had been coerced into going on another date with the black-haired teen after their first date went badly. He was quite irritated with Naruto, but he wouldn't press Hinata. However, Naruto did not take the idea well. Naturally, he wouldn't do anything so crass as to directly oppose the dating. Instead, he was cunning about it, playing practical jokes on the two daters while they were occupied, such as repainting signs or using buckets of water. Hinata tried not to chuckle. "Ah, Naruto-san, Hinata-chan, it's good to see you both again, especially you my young beauty," Akira said with a charming smile as she saw that they both bowed respectfully. Hinata remarked somewhat flatly, "It's good to see you as well Akira, also." She didn't particularly like Akira, even though he was one of the more endearing men she had been made to date. Hinata discovered through the shinobi's whispers that Akira was a notorious pervert who seduced young women into having sex with him before abandoning them. Knowing that she was just another victim for the teenager, she had been appalled when she learned of it. Crossing his arms, Naruto rolled his eyes. Even though he already had a poor opinion of Akira, he was becoming increasingly irritated with the man's constant attempts to flatter Hinata in bed. Because Hinata feared for Akira's life if Naruto found out about her nature, she had taken care to ensure that Naruto was unaware of it. With the intention of speaking to Hinata's friend, Akira turned to face Naruto but stopped when he noticed the white bandages showing through his sleeves. "I see that you've been injured recently Naruto-san," he said. As he eyed Akira's stomach, Naruto said, "Yeah, bit off more than I could chew with training," before a gleam of mischief appeared in his cerulean blue eyes. "You might want to start training a bit yourself. After all, the lifestyle of a noble isn't an active one," he said, unfolding his arms and exposing more of the white bandage. Akira skillfully concealed the twitch in his forehead. "I will consider your suggestion. Moving on to more important matters, it's quite nice that we ran into each other today. I was hoping you would join me today, Hinata. Just the two of us." Hinata gave a kind smile. "I would love to, unfortunately Naruto and I have other matters to deal with first," she said. Akira let out a defeated sigh. "Ah, I see. Well, it just would have been nice to spend my last day in the village with you. But I suppose you have your own things to deal with," he replied with a sense of disappointment. Hinata suppressed a sigh because she was aware of her obligation. "I suppose I have some time," she said quietly, glancing appreciatively at Naruto. Naruto would have problems because of her father if she didn't depart amicably with Akira. "Lovely," was Akira's reply, A180. The two of them departed, and Naruto complained in frustration. Then, with a defiant smirk, he leapt to the rooftops. Hinata and Akira were largely left alone as they navigated the village because neither of them, or rather, Akira, was aware of the shadow that followed them. As they approached a small shack selling novelty items, they looked through the inventory. Akira slowly extended his hand to the side as Hinata examined a few of the objects with interest, but before he could take any action, he was bumped into. "I apologize sir, are you hurt?" he said, turning to the elderly man in question and letting out a momentary groan of frustration. The elderly man gave a feeble laugh. After recognizing the elegant attire, the elderly man bowed and passed by, inadvertently jabbing his cane into the top of Akira's foot. "Oh no, I'm fine, just lost my balance is all," he said. As the piece of wood pierced the top of Akira's foot, he let out a muffled scream. Hinata turned to him in concern and asked, "Are you all right Akira?" But she knew exactly what was happening. "Ahaha, I'm fine. Just rolled my ankle," Akira said with a slightly forced smile, laughing weakly as he trembled lightly. The elderly man ducked into an alleyway, and Hinata turned to face him after giving him a nod. She wondered what other tricks Naruto would pull, and a tiny smile tugged at her lips. Their date was trampled underfoot all day. Every time he attempted to hold her hand or make a move while strolling through the streets, he would either run into someone or have something thrown or dropped on him. When he tried to put his hand on her shoulder and a sea of people suddenly parted them, he finally let out an irritated growl. "Gah!" he cried in exasperation. He was working too hard and not getting very far in his attempt to woo Hinata. Hinata looked at him, bewildered. "Are you all right?" With a defeated sigh, Akira gathered himself. "Yes, I'm fine. I'm just frustrated at what deity is getting in our way." After letting out a similar sigh, Hinata looked up to see Naruto laughing quietly. "Well, I think that's enough time wandering around the village. Why don't we make our way to a meal? Hinata winced in shock. Sorry. Akira's eyebrow went up. Are you alright, Hinata-chan? Hinata chuckled uneasily. I'm fine. Yes, getting something to eat would be good. With a nod, Akira and the two of them headed to a nearby restaurant, which was obviously a fine dining establishment. Naruto watched them enter, glanced around, leapt down close to the window, and watched as they sat down and placed their food order. Naruto heard, "Hey boss," breaking his reverie. After blinking, Naruto swiveled to the side. "Oh, Konohamaru," he said, a little taken aback. There, he did not see his pupil. He was about to dismiss him, but Naruto stopped and looked down at his apprentice with a menacing smile. "Hey, Konohamaru, wanna help me out with a ninja mission?" he asked, knowing the answer already. While Akira and Hinata were seated, Hinata saw two individuals enter the restaurant, Ebisu and his pupil Konohamaru. Akira turned to face Hinata after noticing her interested look. "You know them?" After giving a curt nod, Hinata changed the subject. Konohamaru wondered why they were there as soon as they entered. "Hey Bo. Ebisu. Sensei, why are we in this stuffy place?" Ebisu snidely adjusted his glasses. "Simple, honorable grandson. While out in formal meetings with officials and other cages, it's likely you'll be involved with formal dinners. You should know the proper etiquette for such situations, as well as what the proper foods while meeting with other officials should be. It is required as." Ebisu was shocked to discover that his son was absent. Honorable grandson. Honorable grandson. "Hey, come on, let's eat already," exclaimed Konohamaru from a nearby seat. Ebisu approached with a frustrated sigh. "Honorable grandson, you shouldn't run and shout like that, it's unbecoming." "Ah, shut up. I'm starving." As he and Konohamaru placed their food orders, Ebisu sat down irate. There was a relative quiet for the next few minutes until Ebisu saw their server coming with their food on his tray. "Why don't you be a good Samaritan and bring my soup over to me, honorable grandson?" Ebisu suggested, gesturing to the waiter. Konohamaru got up and sighed. "Stuffy jerk." Noodles and broth flopping around, Konohamaru ran over to the waiter and chatted with him for a moment before grabbing the soup and running back to Ebisu. Ebisu got up in concern. "No, honorable grandson, don't." Konohamaru stumbled over his own feet, fell face first, and flung Ebisu's soup into Akira's lap, but it was too late. Before he calmed down, Akira shook his fist and widened his eyes. He cast a worried glance down at Konohamaru. "Pardon me, are you hurt?" Konohamaru sat up with a moan. "OWWW, you jerk." "Pardon? You tripped me, I did no such thing." "Jerk." Konohamaru then hurled a paint bomb at Akira's face right away, covering his face, hair, hat, and top of his shirt with pink paint. Konohamaru fled after sticking out his tongue. Akira turned to Hinata after taking a few deep, soothing breaths. His tone was flat and calm. "Please excuse me while I wash this off," he said. He had never been so humiliated in his life. As he turned and walked away, Hinata grinned and nodded while he laughed quietly into her hand. Akira proceeded to the restroom down a corridor. "This is too bizarre. It's just like before. At least it's not the same putrid color. What pretty pink hair." Ebisu smirked proudly behind him as Akira froze and spun around. "Something I can help you with?" Ebisu gave a shrug. His voice did not sound the same as it had just a few moments before in the dining room. "Not particularly, though I think you look better in orange," he said as he left the restroom. Akira had heard the voice only a few times, but it was a familiar one. Akira clenched his fists and sighed. I see how it is, Naruto." Before they burst out laughing, Ebisu and Konohamaru fled the restaurant and dashed into an alleyway. Ebisu was surrounded by smoke, which eventually dissipated to reveal Naruto. He patted the boy's helmeted head and said, "Ha ha ha. That was great, Konohamaru." When Naruto complimented him, Konohamaru smiled broadly. "So I did good," he said, and Naruto nodded. "Then teach me that genjutsu you used on the real Ebisu." "Teme," Konohamaru insisted. As he considered teaching a child such a technique, Naruto raised an eyebrow. "Okay," he said after making up his mind. The amusement that Konohamaru would provide would outweigh the damage to his conscience. Not only did Konohamaru get to learn a powerful jutsu, but he also got to make fun of Hanabi for pulling a practical joke on him. The following morning, Kakashi, Hinata, Kiba, and Naruto arrived at their training ground to determine their daily objectives. "So, are we finally getting something done today, Sensei?" Kakashi chuckled with laughter. "Yes, Kiba, we are. In fact, we'll be heading to the Hokage's tower to get our newest mission momentarily." I've even picked the perfect mission beforehand. Minutes later, Team 7 reached the Hokage's office and waited to be given their mission, standing in the center of the room. Kakashi began, Team 7 reporting in for, but the Hokage stopped him with a raised hand. Your team has been requested for a mission, Hiruzen said in a resigned tone after leaning back in his chair and taking a puff of tobacco. Kakashi narrowed his eyes in perplexity. He had been asked for a mission 6 times this week, which was extremely unusual for a genin team, but it wasn't unusual for a team or ninja to be asked. Why had they been asked to join Team 7 when they hadn't even been together for a month? Although it was possible that someone they completed a D-ranked mission for had been impressed by their work, the Hokage could infer from his posture that this was not the case. The gray-haired ninja caught the scroll that the Hokage threw at him and asked, "What's the mission?" After a minute, Kakashi hummed to himself as he read the scroll. For a C-ranked, the mission was a bit high profile, but not particularly so. They would be traveling at civilian speed for 2 or 3 days in order to escort a VIP to the capital. Additionally, they would be protecting the servants that the VIP would be bringing. He could understand the Hokage's reluctance to grant them the mission, even though it sounded better than the one he had originally intended to accept. The conflict between his team and the client was almost immediately apparent to him. We'll take it," Kakashi remarked idly as he put the scroll in his little pocket. He thought that his adorable genin would learn a valuable lesson from this. You won't always like the person you're protecting. Are you sure, Kakashi? I know your genin are well trained, but I would normally send a team of chunin for this kind of mission, Hiruzen said, raising an eyebrow at the Hokage. The VIP was the son of a powerful figure in the capital, despite the fact that the mission was officially a C-ranked. The likelihood of shinobi getting involved was slim, but Hiruzen never liked to take chances. Nodding, Kakashi said, I'm sure they can handle it. Hiruzen let out another sigh, but he chose to believe Kakashi when he said, so be it. Bring in the client. As the client entered, the doors opened. Based on the conversation they had just heard, all of the genin were anticipating a princess or a high-ranking noble. They received Akira instead. Of course you would be on her team, Akira muttered, placing a hand on his forehead in frustration at Naruto's blonde mop of hair. Then, he approached Hinata and gently grasped her hand, saying, but if it means that I have someone of your caliber protecting me, I am willing to suffer through it. You're right, you do need someone protecting you, Naruto said, a menacing smile playing at his lips before he took hold of Kiba's and Akira's arms. Before both of their hands were covered in blue chakra, the two boys let out a cry of surprise and annoyance. Akira shouted in surprise, momentarily losing sight of his years of emotional control training, and attempted to yank his hand away as Kiba followed suit. But before they were unable to move farther, their hands could only reach a distance of roughly 6 feet. Kiba yelled, what the hell is this? And yanked hard at the line of chakra that linked his hand to Akira's, causing him to collide with his face. Too troublesome to explain, but think of it as a handcuff. You can only go so far away from each other unless certain requirements are met or I cease the jutsu. Naruto smiled, drawing a glare of bloody murder from Akira and Kiba. Kiba already knew that this guy was a complete jerk, so the idea of having to spend a lot of time with him did not appeal to Kiba at all. However, Kiba's wet dog odor was not the only reason Akira wanted the jutsu to end. She also wanted to know how he was going to woo Hinata at this point. Daggers were being stared into an indifferent Naruto as Hinata and Kakashi looked on in amusement. Frustrated, Hiruzen drew his hat down. I really don't think this is the team for the job. No, said Akira, uninterested. I believe they are plenty qualified for my protection, he said more elegantly after clearing his throat. Kakashi gave a nod of approval. Plus it might be a nice, learning experience for the team. With a heavy sigh, Hiruzen said, fine, but he was still plagued by negative thoughts about this mission. Kakashi instructed Akira to head for the west gate as the group departed. They had to depart together because Kiba and Akira were conjoined. Kakashi stopped Naruto before he and Hinata went to accept her offer from yesterday. He said, yo, Naruto, stay behind for a second, but it was a subtly implied command. After a moment of perplexity, Naruto assured Hinata that he would catch up with her. Naruto said, what's up Ni-san? As the two started to move. With a languid gaze, Kakashi asked Naruto, do I need to worry about your chakra handcuff? After all, not everything goes as planned on a mission like this. Even though it was funny, a few giggles weren't worth the chance of their client dying. Chuckling. Nope, since it's my chakra, it responds to my will. I've placed a few requirements on it in case I'm not around when it needs to come off. If their heart rate accelerates above a certain point, then it'll just dissolve. It'll also dissolve when they want it to come off badly enough, he continued. After giving it some thought, Kakashi nodded. even though he wasn't entirely in favor of Naruto hurting a once important person. Akira didn't like Naruto in the first place. In order to await the arrival of Akira, Kiba, and his servants, the team headed to the front gate. Though he chose to keep it to himself, Naruto was already irritated because he disliked the idea of servants. Until Akira and Kiba actually arrived, that is. Naruto gaped in shock. He muttered, "Why you gotta be kiddin' me," incredulously. The cart that Akira used to move everything he owned was the cause. The carriage he rode in, a huge cart twice as big as usual, and a nearly 10-foot bag containing all of his belongings. Around him, his servants are moving on the ground, carrying items that the carriage is unable to hold. Naruto thought it was unjust. Akira held out his hand as the carriage came to a stop. "Hinata, would you like to ride in the carriage with me?" Hinata gave a headshake. "No thank you. I will be better able to fight out here than in there." Akira let out a defeated sigh. "So be it." Kakashi approached Akira after Naruto grinned. "So, have you gathered everything you need?" Akira gave a nod of approval. "Good. In that case I say head out. At a civilian pace we should reach the capital in 3 days' time, barring any interruptions." "Good, then let's go. My father will be eager to hear what I have to tell him." After blinking curiously, Kakashi gave the order to proceed, and the group set out on their arduous journey to the capital. The group had only been gone a few hours when, in the opinion of one particular crow, things began to get rough or annoying. The first was that Akira had been attempting to get Hinata into his carriage for nearly the whole time. From the cunning, asking Hinata to assist him in investigating something, to the obvious, simply jumping on top of the carriage, Naruto spent the majority of his time attempting to stop that. Since they couldn't be more than a few feet apart, it didn't help that Kiba was already seated with him. The tension between Naruto and Akira began to increase later in the first day when Naruto observed that the servants were beginning to exhibit signs of exhaustion. This was not surprising because the servants were not trained shinobi and were unable to take a break during the day because Akira had been able to eat in the carriage and the leaf ninja had been trained to eat and walk simultaneously. "They need a break." Akira looked down at Naruto and blinked in surprise. "Pardon?" "Once more," Naruto said, "your servants, they need a break." Akira gave him a perplexed look. "And what would you know about my servants? Look at them, they're just fine. You should mind your own business. Though for someone as insecure as you that may be hard." "Insecure?" Naruto asked, raising a sardonic eyebrow. "Yes, insecure. Why else would you cling to Hinata-chan so? Why would you interfere in her affairs as if you were a jealous child?" Naruto was about to insult Akira when Kakashi intervened. "Naruto!" cautioned Kakashi. After giving Akira a fierce look, Naruto arched an eyebrow and used the bottom of his foot to channel chakra while he was moving. The wheel slid off and the carriage came to a stop as a ghostly blue hand appeared from the wheel and then yanked off the hubcap. Naturally, Akira felt the jar and let out a startled shout. What on earth was that?" Fake interest. Naruto glanced at the ground. "Looks like it fell off." "What fell off?" Naruto merely gestured toward the steering wheel. With a sigh, Akira gestured for his servants to rest. A few of the female servants gave Naruto a thank you smile. Kiba's eyebrows arched. Naruto and Hinata ate a little meal he had prepared for them in advance while the makeshift caravan paused to wait for the carriage to be fixed. One of the servants approached Naruto while they were eating and gave him a small bow. Excuse me. Would it be okay if I asked you something?" Naruto responded with a straightforward nod. "Well, why did you stand up for us like that?" Naruto cocked his head, perplexed. "What do you mean?" "Oh, was I not clear enough?" I meant why did you try to get a break for us?" Naruto also arched an eyebrow. "I'm still confused. Why wouldn't I? It's obvious you guys are tired." After blushing a little, the girl gave him another confused look. "But why would you worry? We're just mere servants." Naruto let out a frustrated groan. "That's irrelevant. You're people. You're humans who have limited amounts of energy and need to take a break now and then. That jerk has no right to push you to the point of exhaustion like that." The girl's cheeks flushed bright red, and she bowed deeply. "Thank you Naruto-sama." Curious, Naruto blinked. "Sama." Kiba, whose keen ears had picked up on the conversation, gazed at Naruto in surprise before letting out a long, frustrated sigh. The group chose to camp there for the night because it took so long to fix the carriage. Even after Kakashi had reprimanded him, Naruto appeared to be happy about that. Naruto approached Hinata to ask her a question as they prepared the camp for the night, but he was perplexed by her seeming evasive of him. He dismissed it and returned to work with the others, preparing the camp. The following day they returned to the trail and resumed their journey to the capital. Kakashi's reasoning had caused Naruto to lessen his pranking on Akira that day. However, he was able to provide some assistance to the servants by providing them with food, water, and other necessities while they were traveling. Even the items they were carrying were sealed in a storage scroll by Naruto. In the middle of the second day, things became a little more tense. They encountered another caravan, which is the cause. In addition to being a traveling trade caravan, it was also brimming with alluring women. Naruto reasoned that purchasing something from a pretty face would make it easier for people to do so. Akira was 2 steps away from drooling over the girls, and Naruto could see it with ease. "Pardon me, Kakashi." Kakashi looked at Akira languidly. "That caravan over there, they don't have any guards, do they?" Kakashi looked at the nearby caravan and arched an eyebrow. They appeared to have a small group of hired mercenaries. He gave a shrug. Nothing on the level of a shinobi but something adequate. Akira gave him a chin rub. "But they are such a large caravan. With that many goods they'd need proper defense. It's decided. We should link up with their caravan. As a son of one of the leaders of our great nation, it is my duty to protect all of the people traveling within its borders." Naruto let out a moan. "It may extend the length of our trip, but I think it is an acceptable trade-off to keep the group of people safe. After all, it is merchants like them that keep our great nation stocked and supplied." Kakashi shrugged again after watching idly. "Works for me." "What?" argued Kiba and Naruto. It was Naruto's responsibility to forage for food, and he wasn't even certain that it would last for another day. But Kiba didn't want to be tethered to this instrument any longer. Team 7 and Akira's entourage had significantly slowed down after joining the new caravan and, of course, after speaking with the leaders. Naruto approached Kakashi, who was walking slowly, with an inquisitive expression on his face. "Hey, Ni-san, how much longer is going to take now?" After a few moments of thoughtful looking up, Kakashi shrugged. "Dunno. You'd probably have more luck with the leader of the caravan." With a frustrated sigh, Naruto walked up to the front where the man in question was strolling. Naruto went up to the tall, red-skinned man with green eyes and red-brown hair. The man was equally intimidating and as tall as a giant. However, Naruto was unaffected by his appearance because he frequently called some of the world's strongest men unpleasant nicknames. "Yo, giant." "Osan," the man smiled as he turned to face Naruto. "Ah, you're one of those ninja, aren't you?" Naruto gave a nod. "What do you need?" "I'm just curious, how much longer do you think the trip will take, at this rate I mean?" In contemplation, the man placed a hand on his chin and rubbed his unkempt beard. He hummed for a few seconds before turning back to Naruto. "You said you're heading for the capital, correct?" Naruto gave a nod. "Then, it'll probably take a little under a week to get there at this rate." As the caravan passed him, many of them perplexed, Naruto froze and stopped dead in his tracks. "A week? I'm going to die from starvation by tomorrow," he thought frantically. How on earth was he going to live off of scraps for an entire week? As Akira's carriage passed Naruto, she gave him a perplexed look. "You should really get moving, Naruto. We don't need you holding us back any more than you are already." Naruto stood mumbling and twitching his eyebrow. "Me, I'm the one, holding us back." Naruto inhaled deeply before letting it out. He balled his fist. "Even if you are the client, if I go cannibal then you're the first one I'm eating." But tensions between Naruto and Akira started to rise, and in this case, Naruto was totally unaware of it. Along with Akira and his servants, the girls in the group simply talked to each other and their new shinobi helpers as they made their way slowly down the dirt path that wound toward the capital. With Kakashi in the center to allow for quick reaction and Hinata remaining at the back to keep an eye on the caravan and the area surrounding it with her Byakugan, Naruto had been chosen to take the lead in the new formation. He periodically glanced behind him to keep an eye on things as he surveyed the area. Akira and Kiba were also in the center. Akira's carriage and the most valuable cargo were located there. After some time, he saw that one of the servants was starting to perspire and stagger, but His Highness was oblivious. Beside him, Naruto made a shadow clone without a sign and hurried back to the man who was stumbling in the formation. "You all right?" The man gave him a feeble glance and smiled at him. At Naruto's incredulous gaze, he trailed off. "Yeah, I'm fine. I could use a drink of water though." With a nod, Naruto opened a tiny water bottle and gave it to the man. He gave a grateful nod and quickly drank the water. Then he winced and gave Naruto a pitying glance. Naruto grinned. "It's all right. I've been trained to go for a lot longer without water than a civilian. Besides," he continued with his trademark grin, "I wouldn't get paid if you guys didn't make it one piece." After that, Kiba and Akira went pale as a number of the caravan girls. One with blonde hair, one with waist length blue hair, one with long green hair, and one with short black hair. Almost passed out at Naruto's remark. So cool. Naruto looked at them curiously but brushed them off as strange people. Akira's eyebrows twitched. That bastard. Naruto simply arched his brow. Later on, there was another incident that was similar. A young woman with long brown hair, one of the caravan girls, approached Akira carrying a plate of fruit. "Pardon, my lord, would you like some fruit?" Akira grinned as she glanced down at the girl. "Of course, my dear. I would gladly accept food from you. It is kissed by the sun itself." After grinning at his compliment, the woman approached Naruto as well. "Here, would you like some?" After giving a nod, Naruto reached into his pocket. "Sure, how much?" The woman's eyebrow went up. "Nothing, you agreed to give us your aid in our travels for free. In return, you needn't pay a thing." Dismissively, Naruto waved his hand. "That's dumb. I still need to pay you. I doubt you got those for free. Besides, a few ryo for a juicy apple you spent your time getting or growing is nothing." After giving Naruto 2 apples, the woman grinned broadly. "If you truly must know, it'll be 7 ryo." Using his current savings, Naruto purchased the entire bushel and consumed all of them in a single bite. He then nodded and gave the woman the money. He swallowed some whole. Naruto's fangirls cried out, "So cool," but he chose to ignore them. Even though he believed they were behaving like the Tamiz fangirls, he rejected the idea. When he could count the number of people who had ever liked him on one hand, the idea of random people liking him for no apparent reason just didn't register with him. Akira crushed his apple with his hand as Kiba snarled in frustration. The caravan paused later that day to make camp. Naruto observed that the servants and caravan riders were starting to erect the camp. He approached one of the group's head servants. To get his attention, he gave him a quick tap on the shoulder. "Hey, I'll take over." The man gave him a perplexed look before grinning. "No, it's all right. Besides, it'll take all of us." With a wave of his hand, Naruto produced 40 copies of himself while grinning. Naruto smiled before he began, saying, "Leave the tent to me," as the caravan gaped at the display. As the 41 Narutos entered and set up the tent, the caravan members and servants stared in astonishment. This time, Naruto's fangirls remained quiet. They fainted from blood loss while imagining what else Naruto could do with his clones, which is why. Later, after the tents were set up, Akira was sitting by the fire, showing the caravan's girls his skillfully crafted moves. As Kiba listened to the tool's pitiful lines, he almost felt like throwing up. But that doesn't mean he wasn't attempting to attract attention of his own. With Akamaru's assistance, he had been able to win over a couple of girls. Akira grinned as she gazed up at the stars and sighed in satisfaction as their conversations went on. "You know, ladies, people should try more often to be like the stars." A few of the girls gave him perplexed looks. "What do you mean?" Akira smiled and responded, "Simple, the stars are up in the sky, existing together, acting as one entity despite being separate beings. Providing light to the world below and to each other, being so close and connected as one moving body." When he said that, the girls all swooned. As he tended to the fire, Naruto sighed in frustration. "Don't kid yourself." Akira cast an irritated glance at Naruto. Then, grinning, he challenged Naruto to something he knew the blonde would not be able to do. "Oh, and what do you mean by that?" Naruto gave Akira a narrowed look. "What I mean is, don't let appearances fool you. The stars may look so close together from here, but if you get up close you'll see that each star is just floating alone by itself in the sky. The stars may be with each other in that large pool of the sky, but they're all completely alone, isolated from one another, just like people." The girls gasped at the blonde's statement, and Akira shook his fist after giving him an incredulous look. The same group of girls gave Naruto a wide-eyed stare. "So cool." While tending to the fire, Naruto scowled and ignored them. That night, Hinata was assigned the first watch, and she was sitting on a tree with a good view of the forest when she heard a voice behind her. She acted as though she didn't hear the person behind her until they were close. Pissed. Behind her, in the tree, Hinata noticed one of the caravan girls, the one with the curly blonde hair. She glanced at the girl, then down at the floor. How did you get up here?" "Branches." Confusion gripped Hinata as she said, "Oh, do you need something?" After giving a nod, the girl cast a somewhat ashamed glance down. "I was hoping to ask you about him." After blinking, Hinata arched an eyebrow in comprehension. "Oh, you mean Naruto," she said somewhat flatly as she suppressed a jealous outburst. The attention Naruto appeared to be getting from women made Hinata jealous, but she chose to ignore it because she was happy for her friend. She believed it was beneficial for him to be liked by the majority for once because he was so accustomed to the village's unfavorable opinions. The girl scooted up to Hinata's side after nodding. Yeah, him. After giving it a small scowl, Hinata shook her head. What do you want to know? Oh, just simple stuff. Like what's he normally like, what's he like to eat, who are his parents? After squinting at the final question, Hinata sighed and gave a straightforward, sequential response. Food is Naruto's favorite thing. It doesn't matter what kind, but he likes ramen the best, she began, and was taken aback when the girl began taking notes. Hinata hesitated as she considered how to respond to the final question. Naruto's is laid back, but he's very protective of some things. He can also be a little distant at first, but once he gets to know you he won't be, she said. About Naruto's parents, well, I don't know, and neither does Naruto since he's an orphan. Confused, the girl blinked. An orphan, you say? Oh, that must have been so hard for him. Hinata gave a nod. It was. He was a very lonely and had something terrible happen to him. After that he had trouble making friends, but he made more friends in the past year and now he's not lonely anymore. The girl gave Hinata a cunning smile. Do you consider yourself one of his close friends? When Hinata realized what it meant, she blushed after blinking in bewilderment. She turned back to the girl after frantically pressing her fingers together before she could manage to eke out, well, yes, friends at least. You wanted to know a few other things, didn't you? The girl nodded, and she and Hinata talked about a variety of subjects throughout the night, most of which had to do with Naruto. Naruto groaned as he woke up the following morning and slowly sat up. With a heavy yawn, he stretched and then climbed out of his sleeping bag. He heard a commotion close by and narrowed his eyes. As he approached to look into it, he noticed the caravan and the other people standing around, apparently packing up, and two of the girls yelling at one another. As he approached the group, he hummed in frustration. Hey, what's going on? He asked, looking up at Kakashi. Kakashi gave a shrug. Can't say really. To me it looks like those two are fighting over something. Not sure what, but it seems like one of them stole something from the other. Naruto returned to the argument after being unsatisfied with Kakashi's response. He decided he had had enough after a short while and strode into the center of it. Hey, cut it out. A tiny bit of killer intent silenced the two girls as they moaned at him. Frustrated, he scowled at them. So just what the hell's going on here? The two girls huffed and folded their arms. Then one pointed accusingly at the other. Yumi over here stole my special hairpin and refuses to give it back. And I already told Mayu that she dropped it on the path earlier yesterday, protested the other girl, who gave her a fierce look. Yeah right. I'm not so stupid as to do that. Everyone knows you're jealous of me. And preventing me from pulling up my perfectly combed hair is just another to show it. Please, you're just a stuck-up bitch. I have no concern of your stupid hairpin. With a groan, Naruto created a shadow clone and sent it back to the route they had previously taken. Then he turned back to the girls and tried to break up their altercation once more. Listen. I just sent a shadow clone up the path to find the hairpin. He should be back in a few minutes. If he finds it, then you need to apologize to her. Yumi huffed proudly. Naruto turned to face her, looking just as irritated, but if he doesn't find it, then you'll need to help search for it or hand it over if you have it. At Naruto's commands, both girls took a step back and cast gloomy glances down. Kakashi simply gazed in wonder at Naruto. I never imagined that was possible. A few more minutes later, the shadow clone came back and was about to tell Naruto what it had discovered when it caught a glimpse of something. It turned to see Akira punching holes in pieces of cardboard to create designs with a long metal pin with an elaborate head in his hand. It frowned suspiciously and approached Akira. Oi, where'd you get that? Akira arched a displeased brow. Why does it matter to you? Just answer the question. HMPH, I saw it lying on the road yesterday and had one of my servants hand it over. The clone's eyes glinted dishonestly. A few more seconds later, the clone turned the corner and grunted in agony as he pulled Akira, and, in effect, Kiba, by his ear. Kakashi blinked, perplexed. The clone caught Naruto's attention. What's up with this? The clone smiled. I found it. Prince Charming saw it lying on the road earlier yesterday and had one of his servants hand it to him. He's been using it to draw shapes in cardboard. Mayu's eyes widened as she felt bad about shouting at Yumi, but then something clicked, and she snatched the hairpin from Akira with a growl. Ah! She exclaimed, examining the now damaged and bent tip. You jerk! She slammed him squarely on the top of the head right away. How dare you use my grandma's special, handcrafted hairpin as an etch, you jerk! Akira was so hurt and shocked that she was on the verge of tears. Then Mayu approached Naruto and bowed deeply. Thank you for helping me. This hairpin is extremely important to me. I don't know what I would have done if I lost it for good. Naruto simply grinned broadly. Sure, but don't you have someone else to talk to? After blinking in perplexity, Mayu recoiled in recognition and approached Yumi. She first gave Yumi a disgruntled look before changing it to an apologetic one. She apologized and bowed deeply. I'm so sorry, Yumi. I didn't mean to blame you for this. I was just angry and scared that it was gone. Friends. Yumi let out a sigh and then grinned at Mayu as they hugged. Friends. After that, they both bowed to Naruto. Thank you for your help. Naruto grinned his signature smile. Not a problem. Kakashi, Akira, and Kiba were all essentially at a loss. Kiba and Akira clenched their fists in envious fury. The blonde girl smirked as she turned to face Naruto. You're a smooth operator. Naruto then took command as the caravan gathered its belongings and started to depart. Mayu and Yumi suddenly felt the urge to stay close to the front of the caravan, much to Naruto's perplexity and the envy of many of the men. Koga was a robber. He was the leader of a bandit tribe, but unlike other bandit tribes, his operation was far larger than a small group of about a dozen. He wasn't just any bandit, though. No, there were almost 100 people in his tribe. They stayed active by using Koga's cunning. They made sure that they couldn't be linked to any major scores they took, and they never attracted too much attention to themselves. They also believed they had been doing a good job. Until 7 shinobi arrived at their base, that is. Koga swallowed hard. S.So, why are you here exactly? He asked, trying to speak without tremors. He could feel every ounce of intelligence telling him that these people were dangerous. The group leader held up a picture and smiled. It focused on a blonde with blue eyes.
That's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed this great story. See you in the next one.